I like to keep to myself. That probably doesn't surprise you all that much, what with my profession and all. Some would be driven stark mad at doing what I do. I have no doubts about that. But for me personally, I've always liked being alone. Standing on the porch in the rain, the great and eternal light from behind washing over me again and again on its dutiful rotation, illuminating the world beyond, its cascading clouds and stormy seas in all their rapturous glory, opening up to the realm before me to my position up on high, far above the churning waters below, one rough and calloused hand grabbing on the rail and the other raised high to the dark and fuming sky, a sky that sends its bitter threats one after the other in great rolls of thunder and boisterous streaks of lightning. "You ain't gonna scare me," I roar out into the wind, a grin etched creasingly across my face as I laugh and laugh, my beard wild and whipped hither and thither, stained white-gray before its years with the thick salt of the sea air. I close my eyes and take a deep breath in, filling my lungs as a blast of thunder, the loudest of the night so far, blusters and booms around the lighthouse. The rain starts to fall heavier and I can hear it. I open my eyes and see a great sheet of it heading towards me from beyond, approaching steadily as a pale and shimmering wall. I shake my head and laugh once more, tutting and flipping the V sign to the swirl of the storm. The V is a polite suggestion to screw yourself, to ye non-natives, made carringly with two of the fingers of the hand and raised with a wee flick of the wrist for maximum message. "Till next time then, ye great roaster," I chuckle, releasing the rail of my grip and turning with the wind, my battered old coat thrown into a frenzy as I draw it tighter around my shoulders. I push through the door to the lighthouse's uppermost deck and bring it to a swift close as the barrage of rain slams ferociously against the porch beyond and onto the lighthouse roof. The storms have been getting worse recently, much worse, and more frequent too. It used to be pretty calm out here. I rub my hands together and step to the lighthouse's centerpiece. I give the old girl a once-over, checking habitually that the great light is in tip-top condition. I see that she is, and I hang my hat on the nearby hook, heading down the spiraling stairs to my wee kitchen on the ground level. Time for a spot of tea, methinks. A little about myself then, for you who are interested at least a little in this story that I have for you tonight. My name is Douglas Bannerman. I've been the lighthouse keeper of this particular establishment for almost 20 years now, and it's just me here, all alone on this little rocky island, and that's just the way that I like it, I've decided. Nearest village is a 20-minute trip by boat, and the people are kind enough, I'll grant, but they are oddballs. You know what mainlanders are like. You may have been led to believe that there's not a lighthouse left in Britain that isn't totally automated, but you'd be wrong. I like to think of myself as the last, but truth be told, there's a few of us still out here, quiet and humbly doing the jobs that need to be done. I glance at the scratchings carved hastily into the wall above the sink as I set the kettle to boil. Don't leave the light alone. Don't let them in. The twin beams must be manned. The first of these rules is the one that's always stuck out to me. "Aye, Jack, I'll not leave her alone," I mutter idly. My predecessor, Mad Jack Candles, had carved those instructions into the wall in one of his classic bouts of good-natured insanity back when I was his apprentice. His last, as it happened, before he took off with a boat and sailed into the sea and was never seen or heard from again. Crazy man. I have no clue what those other two rules are supposed to mean though. Don't let them in. The twin beams must be manned. I don't get many visitors on my wee island, I can tell you that much for free. And the twin beams. Never been able to make head or tail of that one. The kettle starts to whistle and I pour myself a steaming mug, watching the wisps rise pleasantly from the rim as the rain batters down against the walls of the lighthouse. Weather had better let up. I say out loud to no one in particular, else I may not be able to see the door tonight. It's the night of the reflection after all. Not some poncy inner reflection nonsense mind, just for your own information. A true reflection, the reflection. A shimmering, unearthly reflection caught in the beam of the tower's light on the same night like clockwork every month, out at sea beyond the waves. It rebounds the great light in ways that don't quite make sense. It looks like a door of sorts, like an ancient arched door just waiting to be opened, hence the name. I caught my first glimpse of the door about 7 months ago, a minute or two before the dawn, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't comprehend, I couldn't look away. And then came an icy ripple of wind, and my eyes were forced shut. I had to shield my face, and when I looked back, the door was gone. It occupied my thoughts for the better part of a week, such an obscurity that it was. But then, as we often do, we start to doubt the things that we've seen, the things that don't make sense, and I promptly forgot all about it. Until, that is, by freak chance that it caught my gaze again, and I pissed through the rail one tumultuous night onto the rocks and the froth of the ocean below. And I realized upon analysis that it was the same night, exactly 1 month from its previous appearance. So come month number 3, I waited, poised and ready, and sure enough, under the glittering light of 1,000 stars, there shone the door, reflecting as ever the beam of the lighthouse. Ever since then, ever since I became aware of its regularity, the door has become stronger. It's like keeping a dream journal. The more that you do it, the more vivid your dreams seem to become, and it's because you become the better at remembering them. That's how I understand it, at least, and I'm sure that it is a door of sorts. The thing that I'm seeing, I'm convinced. And tonight's the night. As I clamber back up the steps, blowing on my mug of warm tea, I wonder to myself if I'll still be able to see it through the tempest outside, if it'll still reflect the beam in that same and wondrous way. I've seen a great many obscurity and eccentricity in my time as guardian of this here lighthouse. A great many indeed. I've seen things that you wouldn't believe, and I wouldn't blame you. A throng of pale ships that sparkled in the glow of the moon, flags a-flying and shimmering in and out of sight, swaying dangerously in the churn below before disappearing permanently into a sudden and icy fog. A monstrous broken skeleton that of a colossal and snake-like fish, barely held together by scraps of grain and taut flesh, thrown into a wreck by the wrathful tide against the base of the lighthouse, before collapsing into pieces and down into the deep. A woman, enormous, taller than any mountain or any building made by man, far, far out to sea toward the horizon. I watched her unfurl herself from below the waves to a stand, the water coming up to only her waist. She lifted an arm to me in a slow wave, and I waved back, and she walked away, gradually sinking back beneath the surface as she strode off into the unknown. But the door is something else. It's my only regular visitor, for one, and it always makes me feel a tad guilty. Like a passing glance on something that no mortal man has any right to observe with his naked eyes. But I can't stop, I just can't. Would you? I'm almost at the top of the stairs, back towards the upper deck. I reach once again for my hat, ready to brave the rain when I hear an unusual sound. I stop, tensed, but I think that I must be mistaken. Surely, it's a sound that I haven't heard in a long, long time. One that doesn't really make any sense. But to the chilling of my blood, there it is again, loud and clear above the drumming of the rain. Knocking. I swivel round, teeth grit as I look to the door of the lighthouse far below. "Douglas!" I hear, calling desperately from beyond. "Douglas, it's Heather. Let me in, you great lummox. It's pouring out here. What are you waiting for? Heather, I call back, carefully setting my mug on a wee table and heedfully heading back down the stairs, one step at a time. What sort of man leaves his wife out here in the rain, huh? Come on now, open up. Apologies, lass, I reply cautiously as I descend, licking my lips, suddenly bone dry. What are you doing here at this time, you daft cow? You shouldn't be traveling by boat this late. It's too dangerous. I keep my voice level while my heart is like the rain, a hammer in my chest. Stop mucking about, Douglas, she calls from beyond the door. I'm soaked through here. Just come and let me in. I don't deign to reply this time. I unhook my shotgun from the wall and I step towards the door. Lightning flashes in the world beyond. Douglas, my wife calls again, her tone a little more impatient, a little colder. Douglas, let me in. And I think that I hear something else in that voice too, something that I can't quite put my finger on, and I don't care to. Because it's all well and good my wife wanting in. I wouldn't blame her for that, given the storm. The problem, however, is that the woman's been dead for almost 5 years now. I hold the shotgun steady in my hands, and I approach the shaking door. Douglas, the imposterous voice of my wife calls to me, louder and more urgent, backed by a rumble of anticipatory thunder. Open the door, Douglas. You can tell me why you're outside at all, Heather, I reply, sweat budding and leaking down my brow. It's far too stormy a night to be outside. Just let me in and I'll explain. I need a chance to dry off. She laughs, an artificial sound that sets my teeth on edge. It sounds like laughter, sure, but it's a meager copy. There's no mirth behind it. It's fake. Like a person who had never laughed even once in their life, making a sorry and stilted attempt. I glance to the rules, to Mad Jack's rules above the sink. Don't leave the light alone. Don't let them in. The twin beams must be manned. Don't let them in. All right, Jack, all right. I mutter, every muscle of my being shaking feverishly. You best not be playing pranks with me now. I swallow. I'm sorry, Heather. I call loud above the relentless drum of the rain. I'm really terribly sorry, but as you well know, the woman that I married died a long time ago. I hear a whistle, loud, angry, and high-pitched from beyond the rattling door. I don't know what you think you'll gain by way of entering my lighthouse. I bellow as the whistle rises into a scream that curls my very blood and is terrible beyond words. But you're no wife of mine, and you're not coming in. And just like that, the screaming stops. The door comes to a rest on its hinges, and the storm lulls just for a moment, before a renewed barrage of thunder rocks against the walls. A cold gust blows in from beneath the door and I wipe the sweat from my forehead, swearing to myself, sprinting forward and sliding across the door's second and third bolts, scampering back up the stairs, up to the top deck, past the great light and pushing out of the door into the storm beyond, gripping onto the rail as I squint, peering out into the distance. It takes a moment, a few rotations of the beam, but eventually I catch sight of it. Sure as can be, it's there. The door, the reflection. And tonight, by all that I hold dear, I swear it, that the door stands open. I cannot see beyond, nor can I explain to you exactly what it is that differentiates this door from the door of the previous month. All I know is that it is different, and that it's open. I run a hand through my rain-soaked hair. What is this, Jack? I mutter. What is happening to me? Is this it? Is this the end? Am I finally succumbing to whatever madness it was that you fell to all those years ago? I feel a swell of vomit rise from the depths of my guts and I suppress it, spitting out into the sea. My wife. What would I have seen if I had opened up that door, huh? What horrors come for me tonight? The wind howls in response. The sea surges in towering, angry waves, and a series of figures rise up from the depths. I stare down in cold horror, watching as the sea recedes from the narrow rocky shore at the base of the lighthouse. The waves keep coming, and yet they no longer crash against the lighthouse. They seem to split, to carry off and around the edge instead, allowing room for the figures to make their way up onto the wet rock of the island's tumbled shore. They're pale and shiny, man-sized, and rising up from the darkness of the sea all around, encircling the lighthouse completely. 24 of them, or perhaps a few more still. Their skin is gray, and they are adorned in tattered, sea-stained robes that might once have been white. They step clumsily from the water and onto the land, and the one directly below me looks suddenly up, and I swear in alarm. The man's eyes are like those of a fish, lidless and staring, bulged from the sides of his face. He raises a hand toward me, a long, flayed and scaled fin, and he cocks his head as his robes are thrown about his body in the wind. "Lighthouse keeper," he calls up to me, his open mouth revealing rows of thin, long, and sharpened yellow teeth. "O keeper of the light, an opportunity has been granted to you to rinse yourself of your sins." I grimace and I point the shotgun down towards him and I fire. My aim was always bad and the distance and weather don't help, but I clip his shoulder in a shower of scaled flesh and bone, and he gargles, screaming as he falls to the rocky ground, flailing and twisting unnaturally, crawling back across the stone and into the depths of the sea. Another of these harrowing monks steps forward and takes his place. "Your time runs thin, lighthouse keeper. Opportunity to absolve your crimes is limited. Take this chance while you still can." I shoot again. This time I miss completely. Brittle rock shatters by the figure's feet. I wasn't much of a good man before my time in the lighthouse, you understand. These monsters down below aren't just crying platitudes. I'm sure of it. I get the sense that they know my deeds. They know my past, though I'm not sure how or why. I used to run with some bad groups of people, glorified bodyguarding, basically drugs business, etc. I hurt people that didn't deserve to be hurt. I used to like feeling like part of a team back in the day before I came to appreciate the gift of solitude, as twisted a team as it was. I was never a fan of guns though. I always preferred the knife work. And those days are behind me now anyway, long behind. It took me a while, but I got out. I was a bad person, plain and simple, and that's not the man that I want to be. No one likes somebody like that. The sea-eyed monk raises his arms. He opens his mouth wider, wider still, and he begins to sing. It's a sad, sad song, and one that chills me to my core. The others join as the lightning flashes and the swell of the storm beyond. "Away with you, demons of the deep," I roar. "I've no place for you here." The bishop below holds his hands, his flayed fins out to the sides. He cocks his head and his eyes bulge. "Reject the sins of the land, lighthouse keeper. Submit to the sea and you will be spared." "You're not priests of mine," I call back. "I'll be doing no such thing. We would welcome you with open arms, keeper. Oh, suck my balls, you fish." I hastily reload as the singing grows louder and gritting my teeth, holding steady against the rail as the rain beats down across my head and my back. My coat caught in the wind and thrown behind, and across it as it tries to drag me around the porch. And I fire. Boom. The priest which spoke before dropped like a stone to the ground, but not before losing his head in a burst of wet, gray flesh. The singing comes to a sudden stop as his body quivers on the slippery rock, and the remaining monks turn to face back out to sea. They raise their fins as one end of the water beyond starts to swirl. The waves lose their rhythm and become caught into frothing, churning whirlpool, rising rapidly in speed and intensity as the gale blows my rain-soaked beard about my face. I stare, watching in horror as the water darkens, as the swirl reverses, and great dark spires begin to rise out from beneath. The waves caught in the spin crash into and against each other violently as the thin black spires ascend from the depths, the towers upon which they're built rising with them, and then arches, crenellations, and impossible windows of black and blue glass. I take a step back from the edge, my mouth agape, and a terrible watery cathedral rises out of the sea and up into the storm. What in God's name? I mutter as the dark and twisted cathedral from the world below rises grimly up into the rain. Strange and alien lights flash beyond those deep and ethereal stained glass windows. The waves crash and froth maliciously around the building's paradoxical walls. The robed men from the depths turn back to me and their song resumes, in time now to the rumbles of the cathedral bells, sounding out a beautiful yet terrible melody, a haunting song of the sea. "Repent, lighthouse keeper," cries one of the monks as he shuffles forward. I catch glimpses of those sharp, thin yellow teeth as his lips flap grotesquely open and closed. "Repent and you shall be saved. Cleanse yourself of the sins of the land." And a rush of sickening emotion swells up within me. Swearing, I bring round the shotgun for another blast, but I cannot focus. I cannot aim, and once again the shot goes wide. Pieces of rock shattering pitifully from the ground by the speaker's feet. I slam my hands to my ears. I try to focus on the sounds of the rain, of the thunder, but the singing only grows louder. And the bells, the bells, the bells, the bells. I cannot help my eyes. My gaze is drawn to the cathedral's double doors, its misted gate, and I see it start to open. A shaft of blue light appears from behind, and I know in my heart of hearts that something grisly lies beyond. But I cannot tear my eyes away. I cannot do it. The door. The door, that's why I'm up here at all, to see the door, the true door, the reflection out at sea, my regular guest, and in this moment of sharp remembrance, I bellow and I twist my head, my eyes forced back to their original prize, the shimmering standalone door, the mystic arch beyond, caught just as the beam of the lighthouse passes by. I focus on it now, I focus hard, and I will myself to think of the reflection, to see it and nothing else. And I mutter to myself words of strength, and I find after a rotation or two that I can step back. I do so, I take another, and I turn with a grunt of force, pushing back through the door inside. Taking a breath and cracking my knuckles, I sprint down the spiraling stairs to the level below. I tear open drawers until I find more shells, more precious ammo, and I rifle through my bookcase, pulling books from their shelves haphazardly until I find the King James, my tattered old Bible. It can't hurt. Hardening my resolve, I return up and push back out onto the porch into the rain. Shouting loud above the singing, I begin to read from the Bible. Any chapter will do. I flip the pages over. Revelation's as good as any. And I saw what looked like a sea of glass glowing with fire. I begin picking a passage from the middle of the page at random, shouting over the chorus and the bells and the thunder. Glowing with fire and, standing beside the sea, those who had been victorious over the beast and its image and over the number of its name. They held harps given to them by God. Movement catches my eye and I glance down to the sight of a cluster of monks casting off the many ropes and covers that keeps my little boat protected from the elements. "Hey," I call down, "get your grubby fins off my boat." But they do not. And to my frustration, I can feel the chords of the harmony start once again to overwhelm me. I squeeze the Bible into my armpit and hoist the shotgun, blinking the streams of rain from my eyes and firing shots down to the wayward priest below. 2 perfect hits. The chest of a monk in the outer circle explodes and he stumbles, falling back beneath the waves, and the second shot bursts the head of one of the assailants on my boat, my precious boat. "Get away!" I roar down to the rabble, firing 2 more shots, both missing, before hurling down the Bible in a desperate last bid. The book strikes the back of a gray head and its owner tumbles unceremoniously into the sea. Forget this, I grunt, running a hand across my lower jaw. More of them come now, more of the terrible monks striding out of the watery darkness, eyes unblinking. They're not going to stop, are they? I mutter in despair as they work to untangle the last of the ropes to the boat. They don't want me going anywhere, that's for sure. And then comes the beam of the great light, of my great light. She catches as ever on the arched door out there in the waves, the light reflecting like a mirror of golden glass, caught in a perfect moment of time. And I know what has to be done. I try to drown out the song with the noise of my own thoughts, and I slam back into the lighthouse. I sprint down the stairs and grab a handful of more shells and something else. Something that I hope I can use to bluff my way out of here. An idea that I got from the Bible verse. Glowing with fire, I mutter to myself, pulling open a cupboard with a clatter and taking firm hold of a rescue flare. Standing by the sea, victorious over the beast, I grab my radio receiver and shout out a responseless call for aid into the crackling void. It won't do me any good, I would wager, but again, it can't hurt. I head down to the lighthouse's front door, shotgun in one hand, the flare in the other, and I strike it. A burning and altogether overwhelming red light is thrown proudly across the walls. I squint, it's too bright. I hold the gun between my legs and I wrap an old scarf around the flare, burning my hand a little in the process. I should have done this before setting it aflame, you idiot. The scarf bursts quickly into a frenzied fire and I step forward, unbolting the door and casting one final look at the rules of old Mad Jack, carved so desperately above the sink of all places. Don't leave the light alone. Don't let them in. The twin beams must be manned. Rule number 1, don't leave the light alone. I'm sorry, Jack, I mutter, but if I don't leave her alone just for a little while, then they'll get in anyway and then she'll be theirs. They want me stuck here, Jack. Why else would they go for the boat? I've got no other choice, fella. And besides, what do you know anyway? You're dead, pal. I'm heading for that reflected door. And I squeeze my fist and grab a hold of my gun and I kick through the door and onto the rock, slamming it shut behind me. The storm casting salt and bitter spray up and across my features. The singing stops at once and all those terrible eyes turn to stare in horror upon the fire that I hold in my hand. Behold the power of the land. I roar to them, my bravado entirely false. I step across the wet stone and closer to my boat, thrusting the burning flare this way and that, my face and body aglow in the gloom of the icy tempest. They cower in fear and hold their unnatural hands before their faces to shield their lidless eyes from the red and almighty flame. I pray silently that they do not know how easily they could extinguish my magic with a well-placed blast of water. I worry even now that I will not make it to the boat before the heavy rain gives the trick away. The fire of life, I bellow, shaking the flare madly as I creep closer and closer to the boat. They're all around me, dozens and dozens of them, all moaning, twisting, and shuffling away in confusion. I think about the Bible verse, "This is my harp." I mutter to myself and then I turn to the monks by the boat and make a noise, thrusting the flare suddenly towards them, and they disperse, wailing in horror. With an eye watching warily over the congregation, I pull back the final ropes and tear off the covers with a grunt, dragging the boat fully out of its shelter and hoisting the poles and the trusty wee sail. pushing it out and into the churning waters. I jump in, still holding the flare high in one hand as I grab the ropes, steering madly as the boat is caught instantly in the swell of the waves. I've lost it, I think to myself. I've turned into you, Mad Jack. If only you could see me now, what in the blazes am I doing? And I laugh to myself, despite the fear rippling through me despite everything. I string the flare hastily to the mast and turn behind, raising the gun up high and blasting the closest monk to kingdom come. Stay away from my lighthouse, I call out as the boat leaves the island behind, rocking perilously from side to side. Lightning streaks through the sky. I turn back to the waves. Every time the beam of my precious light comes around, I get a good sight of the door, the reflection, out there in the sea, and I alter my course, heading round towards it. Yes, I may be mad. Yes, I broke one of the rules, but the storms have over this last year been getting steadily worse. It never used to be like this. If I make it through this night, then there'll come another just like it. I can feel it. And the door is like nothing else that I've ever seen. It knows that I'm watching out for it, and it's never been any threat to me, that much is true. And the priest wanted to get rid of my boat. Well, that's too bad for them. Sure, I could try sailing back to the mainland. 20 minutes on a clear day might take 3 times that long in conditions such as these, if I ever made it at all. But what if these things come every night? What if they send my dead wife again? The door comes once a month, and tonight's the night. Oh, tonight's the night indeed. I roar out into the storm as my knuckles burn white with exertion, the wet and heavy rope no doubt forming ugly new calluses across my hands as I heave and pull, steering my course towards the door. Tonight's the night. The twisted song of the abbots of the abyss may have been forced to a close, but the bells of the dark cathedral ring on. I grimace and look to my left as the furious waves crash ceaselessly against its walls. The light beyond those blue and black windows of wet-stained glass flashing and flowing. A poor attempt at enticement indeed, I would say. I'm sure as heck not going anywhere near that thing, and I dread to think what terrors lurk inside. I hear from behind me the desperate voice of one of the monks, still stood uncertainly on the rock of the island. The symphony of the rain and wind and sea is too loud, however, and I am unable to catch what he says. I swivel and reply with a blast of the shotgun, another spectacular miss by a wide margin. Get lost, you pescatarian pansy, I mutter through my sopping beard. My destiny is with the door tonight, and she lies ahead of the door. Every time she catches the light of my faithful rotating light, every time that golden reflection shines back at me from her position at sea, I make sure to adjust my course as best I can, riding the waves towards her. I am the fire upon the sea, I call out to no one in particular. My wee boat a burning and sparking ember of red fire, in the cold and dark and the swell and the swirl. I will claim victory over that beast. The sky answers with drums of thunder, and I grimace, wiping the sting of the sea spray from my eyes. As I sail further out across the intemperate waves, leaving the island and the cathedral behind, shimmering white shapes start to emerge from the surrounding water. They are not swimming, nor are they even wet, it would appear. It doesn't seem like they're even fully here at all. 5 men with skeleton faces, unconcerned by the blaze of the flaring gliding through the air, drifting legless around and around the boat, muttering and whispering through faded jaws. Oh, honorless wretch. The first begins, hovering by my left as I steer desperately through the churn. Oh, breaker of his word, he who would abandon his duty at the time of its greatest need. He drifts behind and a second comes up on the right. his words a winter's chill upon my cheek. You have forsaken the bond unbroken of the keepers of the tower. You forfeit your place in their halls in pursuit of a shining door. I keep my eyes upon the reflection. My lighthouse guides the way. The being shimmers away and a third comes up from behind. I feel his breath like frost on the back of my neck. All that glitters isn't gold, a lighthouse keeper. Your solitude has left you blind. Away with the despairing rites of the depths. I roar to a streak of lightning. You'll not silence the spark of my spirit with your cold cliches. I will not turn back, not this day nor any other. My path is set and I follow the light. Dogs' bodies such as ye only know the dark of the deep. What advice have ye to offer me? Begone. And bitterly they do, twisting and spiraling, muttering and simmering and returning to the white gray of the sea froth, lost to the storm. I tug my battered blue coat further around my shoulders. I pull hard on the ropes. The flare fizzles and sputters under the pressure of the rain and the flicks of the tails of the waves. Hold tight, I growl to the flame. Hold tight for just a tad longer, you can do it. A naked torso rises from the water to my side, and then another and another still. I glance down to them and I'll give them credit, they are beautiful. Hair long and wet draped down the sides of their faces and further into the sea, their eyes wide and blue, their mouths coy, smiles that plead innocence but hint at so much more. They swim alongside and I see the silver of their scaled tails shining as they glide, keeping easy pace with my vessel. Douglas, the middlemost calls. She tucks a wet lock behind an ear and looks up at me from beneath her lashes, her voice a river, strong and yet soft. She traces her fingers along the rim of the boat. Douglas Bannerman, it's not too late for you, my captain of fortitude, but the sea threatens to take you, sailor, and she will not be kind. She despises your bravery, she envies your fire, and she resents your masculine, single-minded determination. One of the ladies dips below the surface and swims beneath, appearing up on the other side. She doesn't understand you, Douglas, and she never will. But we do. You can have us, Douglas. We will be yours and you will be ours. Submit yourself to us and we can save you. The third joins the first and strokes her sister's hair. She plants a soft and tender kiss on the creature's cheek. She smiles at me, her eyes pleading. The sea has no power over us, Douglas. She bends to our will, as she could to yours. We could belong to you. Douglas, you just have to reach out and take us. I square my shoulders against the driving rain, tearing my eyes from the glow of their beauty and adjusting my course. The boat rocks up and around under the duress of the watery siege. Your offer is kind, mermaids fair from the world below. I call back to them, jaw set, but I have no desire to bend the sea to my will. I ask for naught but a little cooperation, just enough to see me through. I deign not to look directly at the ladies in the sea as I speak, but in the corner of my gaze I spy shadows dark and unnatural forming around their eyes. I can sense them seethe with my sixth sense. And while your beauty is enough to take away the breath of any man, land or sea, my heart belongs to another, and it will until the end of my days. So I thank you, sea maids, but my answer is no. They hiss in response, a frightening scrape of a sound that sends goosebumps shooting down my back, and they scratch at the sides of the boat. I pay them no heed and they disappear back below the waves, tails splashing as they descend down into the darkness. The door approaches. The waves smash up against the bow of the boat. They throw themselves around in a frenzy, and as they do so, they drag me along with them. To my right, the sea spouts upwards in a sudden pillar of water. I swear in a shout of alarm as it merges with the rain. The waves below froth and part to allow a titanic and terrible tentacle to burst from beneath. A searching, slimy arm of an ancient monster from a time gone by. Water cascading from the appendage as its brothers rise up alongside. They writhe and pulse and arc and convulse in strange and bewildering patterns, blindly reaching out for potential prey to drag beneath. I duck as a tentacle whips suddenly around just above my head, catching thankfully on nothing but the salty air. The monster roars from the deep and the waves drop, only for a moment into great and grinding beak, a gaping void of a mouth, hungry and merciless, becomes visible just below the surface. I stare madly to the side, away as best I can from the lurch of the wavering arms. The monster moans again and the sound rises to a bludgeoning, watery wail, quickly becoming one with the thunder beyond. The tip of the tentacle finds its way onto the boat and I hastened over, kicking it away with a few well-placed stabs. But I'm on its radar now. Closer, the tentacle slithers, seeking me out with an animal hunger. One of them swings viciously down from above, red in the glow of the flare as it comes right after me. I angle the shotgun up high and send a blast out to meet it, splattering a healthy chunk from the tentacle as it careens suddenly backwards in distress. The sea to my right rises and shifts worrisomely, and I get the impression that the colossal monster is adjusting his position. I won't be your supper tonight, Kraken of the North. I shout loud, firing off another blast at an approaching arm. I'm not some gawping, defenseless critter of the sea. I will not roll over onto my belly in submission, and I will go neither quietly nor easily into that watery dark, should the end be in my sights. You're naught but glorified calamari, and you don't frighten me. The kraken wails and a tentacle slams into me from behind. The air is knocked from my lungs and I'm pushed painfully up against the pole with the flare. It's dying now, but it's still bright enough, still well hot enough, I can tell you now. I can feel the icy burn of the tentacle's suckers against my back and through my coat, and I bellow in cathartic cursing as I pull the flare from its position and twist, slamming it deep into the tip of the monster's arm. It writhed in panic trying to get away, but I hold it in my grip, jamming the flare in deeper, smelling the sizzle of its flesh as it peels itself into sharp bursts from the skin on my back, taking a good deal of my lovely coat along with it. The flame goes out, the red of the flare. Were it not for the dutiful rotation of my trusty lighthouse, I would be plunged into total suffocating stormy darkness. The scorched tentacle retreats, terrified of this sensation unknown, and I watch as one by one they all lower reluctantly back under the safety of the waves, off perhaps in search of an easier meal. I laugh then. I laugh loud and clear as I grip tight to the rigging, lightning flashing for a final time as I come upon the door. The lighthouse beam swings around and the reflection of the golden arch stands tall before me. I cannot tell what is on the other side, but I can see that it is open. It's a curious sensation, I'll grant, and I won't have to wonder for long, because with the last great wave from behind, the boat is lifted. I grin from ear to ear and holding steady, my sea legs tested to their absolute limits. We sail onwards through the door. The air shimmers like a pool of liquid glass as I sail madly through the door. Golden yellow light washes over and through me and I pass as a lone captain from one storm to another. The wave I ride carries on and crashes down into new yet no less choppy waters, shining silver in place of the familiar blue-black and frothing beneath a foreign sky. I stare up into it. It's a sky of amber bursting with full, heavy clouds of gold, clouds that swirl like a whirlpool in the heavens, thinning and paling ever so slightly into shades of lime as they edge towards the horizon. By the brine and blazes blue, I mutter to myself, into what fathomless realm have I intruded? I glance behind. There is nothing there but the door and the rolling waves that stretch off towards the horizon. Ahead, however, there lie more wondrous curiosities. In the distance stands a long, high cliff of shiny black stone that crumbles into the sea. There are no stacks, no arches, nor cracks or caves to be seen, but instead floating spheres of a stone that hover close to the cliff's edge, shining and sparkling with salt, like golden specks under the strange and shifting yellow light from the sky above. And what do I see to the cliff's right, standing alone on an island of the same black stone? A lighthouse. A lighthouse not altogether unlike my own, though the light on this one is out cold, dead dark. Well now, I suppose that'll be my destination then. I bellow cheerfully, grunting and gripping the ropes and adjusting my course through the shiny, silver-gray waves. Through the angry tides I dutifully sail, the boat rising and falling and rocking with the swell of the sea. But a sudden change in the world above gives me cause to glance up from these churning waters. A burst of black, like an ink stain, is spreading across the amber sky. I watch as it starts to flow, to leak in all directions overhead, the shining tips and highlights of the clouds shining bright like rivers of gold against the darkening canvas. The closer that I draw to the lighthouse, the darkness threatens the sky. Come on, I mutter to my vessel, my heart a race. Nearly there, old girl, nearly there. But enough distance lies between me and the lighthouse. Heavy shadow falls across my surroundings, and the cursed, twisted distortion of the ocean makes one last desperate attempt to keep me back. These threats and temptations alike are proof enough that I am set in the right course. The notion burns bright within me. I hold tight to it. The flame of my flare may have been extinguished, but my own inner fire blazes on. An enormous and barnacled boulder from the bottom of the sea now rises up a wee distance ahead, pushing aside the roughened white-gray surface with froth and blasting spout. It groans and grinds and rolls in place as it ascends, held in a torso comprised of twisted seaweed, black and writhing, and endlessly flowing and cascading water, like a waterfall in all directions at once. The spray flying like rain as it catches in the winds of the storm. I shield my eyes as my boat tips away from the entity, and I grab and pull at the rigging to keep myself upright. The boulder spins around in place, and two hollowed cheekbones of rock become visible, beneath two bright and fearsome eyes of icy blue, and still it ascends. Twice my height and then thrice. Rock is drawn from the ocean floor and swept up into its body, held tight by the wraps of the dark sea foliage. "Lighthouse keeper," it groans in a voice like thunder, water spilling impossibly from its stony jaw. I pride myself on my constitution. As I told you at the beginning, I've seen things that most men wouldn't have ever dreamed of. But this thing, the voice sends through me shards of an ancient terror, and I cry out in alarm. Worse than the singing of the monks, worse than the bells of that cathedral. The voice reverberates around and around in my head like a calamitous whirlpool. I have to get away, and so I grab the ropes and alter my direction of course at once, riding the waves of the surging storm, eyes fixed on the monsters, blue and terrible. Her icy gaze bores brutally back into mine, and I hear a voice from behind me. "You don't want to go that way, old chap. Trust me on this one." "God!" I shout in panic, stumbling and swiveling to the voice's source. I recognize it, of course, I just don't believe it. The boat rocks dangerously from side to side on a rising wave, but the owner of the voice stands firm. His sea legs as good tonight as they were on the day that I first met him all those years ago. "Jack," I murmur in disbelief. Mad Jack Candles, hands behind his back and boots firm on the wood of the deck. He stands as a ghostly specter, pale and glowing in the enshrouding darkness, his coat almost as torn and tattered as mine, but colorless now, billowing in the gale. He looks back at me. He winks with his good eye, and his eye patch, of course, it covers the other. "Good to see you again, Douglas." He chortles loudly, and he suddenly lunges forward. I stumble back in fear, but he only laughs in response, bracing his shimmering boots against the deck and the side of the boat, grabbing the nearest rigging and looping it around his arm, pulling and yanking it tight and drawing the boat in the opposite direction back towards the beast. "What are you doing, you mad old man?" I bellow. "You're gonna get us killed." "Oh, a little late for me, Douglas." Jack laughs and then nods to the sail. "Sharp turn this one, and give us a hand, would ya?" I grimace and swear and do as he says. No time for much else now. I turn from the ghost of my mentor to the monster from the depths, the idol of the sea. She roars with the winds as the boat alters its course. My salt-peppered beard bristles wild. "Look over to the left, laddie. You see what you were headed right for," Jack shouts from behind. I glance over and my eyes go wide when I see the glimpses of void-black rocks that the rapidly rising and lowering waters provide, jutting out from the sea like great teeth, ready to bite into the hull of any vessel foolish enough to stray too close. The monster roars, and she throws out two great arms of churning, silvery seawater as the boat hammers towards her on the crest of a wave. "We're gonna crash right into her, Jack," I cry out above the clamor. "Ah, nonsense, Douglas. Look at her chest. What do you see?" "I was always taught that it was rude to look at a lady's chest, Mr. Candles," I shout back, and the Englishman laughs heartily in reply. "Look, Douglas, look. The rock ends there. Below her chest is nothing but water, and we're gonna sail right through. So brace." I roar out a battle cry defiant in the face of this enemy of the deep. Her eyes flash bright in surprise, and with an icy shock, we plunge right through her middle. For several long seconds, I know only the rush and the pour of a death-cold swirl, soaking me through to my skin. I slip and stumble, crashing down to the deck, but the boat nonetheless makes it through to the other side. "Aye," I shout, spitting a mouthful of spray out over the side, cupping my hands and hastily scooping out as much of the water as I can from the embattled little boat as Mad Jack guides the steering. I grab the pole of the sail and rise to a stand. "Sea legs don't fail me now," I command, and I cup a hand around my mouth and shout to the watery witch of the sea as she turns to look at us over her great shoulders of writhing seaweed. "The sea might very well take me one day, lass. I must admit it wouldn't come as no great surprise, but at the very least, my dear, it won't be today. It won't be today." And with a wail and a strike of lightning upon the ink-stained horizon, the monster swells with the surging wave. She rises higher up into the air, and then the lights of her eyes go dark. With a ferocious scream that shivers across the surface of the sea, her form collapses. The grooves and lines of her stony face once again appear as no more than natural cracks and dents in the rock, and the various materials of her being cascaded back into the water. The force of this collapse sees the boat pushed faster and further away. The lighthouse is close now. I turn to Mad Jack, my chest still rising and falling with the shock of the icy water. "Thank you, Jack. Always saving me from bouts of panic, huh?" I look the man up and down. "So pray tell me, what are you then, pal? A ghost of sorts?" Jack flashes a grin as the spray of the sea flows right through him. He grins as he tugs on his rope one last time, and then he ties it off to the side of the boat with his ethereal hands. "Not quite, old sport. I'm not trapped here if that's what you're asking. I'm not even here in any of the traditional senses. Not in body and neither in spirit. To call myself an echo would be more accurate, I should think." I grunt and shake my head. "What happened to you, Jack?" I ask him as my beard drips. I wipe the last of the stinging salt from my eyes. "Why did you go?" I'm sorry it had to be so sudden, truly. I had more pieces of the puzzle revealed to me than you, lad, and I was under a similar duress. So I seized an opportunity that I wasn't sure would come again, and it demanded immediacy. He pushed his wild-blown fringe from his working eye. The twin beams must be man, Douglas, he solemnly says, his coat whipped wild about his shoulders. Rule number 3, the twin beams. I look up to the lighthouse ahead, its bulb dark and dead. Of course. Aye, Jack, I reply. Aye, I hear ya, and it was good to see you again. The man nods and he dissolves at once as a mist and disappears into the whirling winds, and just like that, he is gone. I turn to face back towards the lighthouse. Not far now, not far at all. But the storm, the surging storm. I hold the boat back as I approach, riding the crests of the waves and waiting for a necessary lull, sufficient to see me bring the boat onto the stony shore without smashing it, and myself to pieces in the process. The thunder rolls, the waters churn, and I see my chance. I bellow and pull tight to the rigging, bringing the boat round through the sea. It's far from still, quite far indeed, but it should be enough. It should be enough. The spray blasts high and I bring the boat into these shallower waters of the little island's immediate coast. It's much like my own, though the stone here is smoother and much darker. I stretch out an arm, and when the moment strikes, I grab a hold of the rusted metal of the wee island's surrounding rails. I cry out in pain as my arm feels fit to pop from its socket. But I hold firm, and with all my might, I bring the boat to a rough and jarringly chaotic halt upon the rock, with a scrape and a grind. I grunt in pain as I stumble, hopping out from the side of the boat and grabbing it tight and hauling it as close to the lighthouse as I can, arms burning with exertion, hands shaking and raw from my efforts with the ropes across the sea. But I'm here, wherever here is, I've made it. This is where the door wanted to send me, I'm sure of it. And old Mad Jack had practically confirmed it to me himself. I pull my collar tighter around my neck, not that it's doing me much any good now. The wind is arctic in its attack against my sea-soaked skin and clothes. I grab the handle and make to barge right in, but what would you know, the thing's locked. I try again, rattling the door with full force. I sigh and click my tongue, preparing to kick the thing down. Before I do so, however, I decide to knock, loudly and firmly just in case. I'm no barbarian after all. And what would you know, there comes a response. Difficult to hear above the wind and the surge, but it's a woman's voice. It sounds like she's asking who I am. She sounds frightened, and I don't blame her. The name's Douglas Bannerman, I shout through the wood. I've come from the twin of this here lighthouse of yours. If my understanding is correct, you've a wee problem with your light. You fancy letting me in. And there's a pause. The storm rages. Douglas? Comes the voice. Aye, that's right, Douglas Bannerman. I man the lighthouse. I struggle with how to describe its location relative to my current position. The lighthouse on the other side. I knock again. No, come on, are you gonna let me in or not? I'm freezing my balls off out here. I can assure you that I'm on an errand of the utmost importance. I'll kick down the door if I have to, lassie. The door swings open and a woman of a similar age to myself stands before me, illuminated orange in the glow of the lamps that she keeps around the walls. And for a moment or two my heart stops dead. I can't believe what it is that I'm seeing. I can't comprehend. My mind struggles with the sight. I stutter in surprise and the woman speaks. You won't be kicking down any doors of mine, Douglas Bannerman, says my wife. I only painted the thing last week, I'll have you know. Heather, I shout, stumbling backwards in fear. Recent memories of the unseen nightmare that knocked upon my own lighthouse door come hurtling and return to the forefront of my mind afresh. Hearing her voice was one thing, but seeing her standing right here before me, I cannot believe it. For my heart's sake, I can't. I refuse. Heather, how? You can't be real, you can't. What cruel trickery is this? Please, I'm a hard man and I pride myself as such, but I can't be taking much more of this tonight. I can only handle so much. Heather scoffs and puts a hand to her mouth. A hard man. She chortles good-naturedly, and the way she always did. Oh, you're nothing but a big softy, Douglas. You certainly took your time. Well, blow me down, it's her. It's really her. I swoop in at once and I hold her tight. She squeals as the icy wetness of my jacket and beard connect with her skin, warm and soft. I plant the wettest of kisses upon her lips and she laughs and kisses me back. How is all that I can manage, tears budding at the corners of my eyes. Terrible, suppressed images from 5 years ago flash painfully through my head. Images of Heather falling from the wave-racked little fishing vessel and into the sea. I can still remember the powerlessness of my position in the lighthouse, unable to do a thing but watch and scream to the boat's panicked driver. I shake the memories away. All this time, Heather, all this time, I thought. I swallow. I thought you were dead, woman. How are you here in this place? She smiles and cups my face in hers. Oh, it's so good to see you again, Douglas, she whispers, though we certainly let this awful thing grow out of control now, haven't we? She gives my beard a playful tug and draws me into the lighthouse, closing the door behind her. She snaps her fingers and points to a wardrobe tucked by the wall. You need out of those clothes before you catch hypothermia, so come on, quick. I'm still in a daze, I think. I'm struggling to process. But I do as she says, grabbing a rough and mismatched set of dry gear from the wardrobe. There I was, Douglas, caught in the swirling seas. She begins, moving her arms about dramatically. Struggling to breathe, thrown this way and that. It was so dark, so cold, and then there it was. I saw it, glowing through the gloom, golden white and shining, rippling like liquid glass. An arched door in the midst of the waves. I felt myself get carried right through it, and I found myself in a foreign sea, gasping for breath among silver waves beneath an amber sky. And as I coughed and splashed against the surface, I felt somebody grab my arm, grabbed me and hauled me up into their boat. A boat made of mist. Shining and shimmering like a specter they were. And they'll never guess, Douglas. You'll never guess who it was. I chuckle. Oh, was it old Mad Jack Candles by any chance? She splutters and furrows her brows suddenly cross. She puts her hands on her hips. And how the devil did you know that? I've taken the wind right out of her sails, and looking at her now I can't help but laugh. A hearty laugh for the soul's sake. I've missed you, Heather, I chuckle. I saw Jack myself just now. That guy saved me from certain death. He didn't stick around. My smile falters. I grow more serious and I look my wonderful wife in the eyes. The twin beams, Heather. The twin beams must be manned. You've had an issue with the lighthouse, haven't you? It went out, Douglas. The light went out. Heather says, and she puts her hands together. Mad Jack, just after he had rescued me and I was still on board his ghostly vessel, he told me his tale. He told me that he had died upon the water. He wouldn't say how, he said that it hurt to talk about. But in his own words, he wouldn't allow a little thing like death to get in the way of his mission. I smile. Yeah, that certainly sounds like our Jack. He wouldn't share the logistics with me, Douglas, but he was still able to fix the light the first time around, and he had been waiting in the lighthouse ever since, waiting for a living soul to come relieve him of his duty. She rubs her chin. I haven't seen the man since then, and all these 5 years I thought that perhaps he'd passed on. But if you saw him too. I shrug. He wasn't a ghost, Heather, he told me so himself. An echo, he said. The last traces of light from a faraway star, perhaps. I trail off. What did he tell you? What did he tell you about the lighthouse? The same as the scrawling above our sink, Douglas. The twin beams must be manned, and I've done my duty. I've done it as best I can, but about a year ago the light just stopped. And I tried and tried, but I just couldn't get it to work again. I couldn't do it. And the storms and the horrors out at sea. I see them at night and they've just been getting worse and worse. Aye, it's been rough for me too. But these things happen, don't they? I'm sorry it took me so long to come and find you. She smiles and squeezes my arm, chuckles and says that she forgives me. Right then, I clap my hands. Sounds like I've got a job to do, huh? I wink and I clamber up the stairs as the fearsome hungry wind roars beyond the walls and the waves crash against the shore of the island. There's a reason that my lighthouse remains unautomated. I'm not just some babysitter for the Great Bulb, I'll have you know. I know my stuff, and it takes most of the remaining night into a fair deal of creative engineering, but for now I reasoned it'll do. And sure enough, about an hour or so before the sun's rise, the gears turn and the centerpiece whirs, and the beam of the lighthouse returns at full blast. It's a wonderfully welcome sight, and its presence fills me with a relief and a peace of mind that's difficult to put into words. Around it goes, rotating surely and steadily, and casting its warning light out over the waters, and the terrible storm begins to calm. I stand with Heather on the deck and we watch as the wind settles, as the swirl of the sea starts to slow, and the great light rolls gently around and around. We're approaching the end of my tale now, lads and ladies. Thank you for sticking with me, it's been a real pleasure. Not much left to do now but wrap up the loose ends, I suppose. The door lasted a wee bit longer that night, before it disappeared. I've never seen the thing last so long, in fact. I think it might have waited, waited for us. It held strong and the waters were kind as Heather sailed away across that silver sea. We couldn't stay together, it just wasn't feasible. It took some heavy and quick-fire conversation, but we both ended up at the same conclusion. The twin beams must be manned. There were no more angry waves as she pushed the boat out, no monsters from the deep as she pulled the rigging, and the woman was careful to sail a great distance from these sharp, teeth-like rocks that lurked beneath the surface. The sea was so calm, however, that I should think she could have sailed right over them without issue if she had been so inclined. She was difficult to make out as she passed through the golden arch of the door, twinkling in its reflected light, but I could still just about see her waving to me. I waved back from the island shore and she disappeared safely through. A minute or so later, the door faded away, and the sun rose high on a new day. So, I'm still here. In the other lighthouse, of course, but still doing my job as a keeper. I'm perfectly happy. As I said to you at the start, I like my peace. I really do enjoy my solitude. My wife was always the social one. She'll be happy to return to her friends and family, to spend time in the village on the mainland. She's got 5 years of catching up to do after all, though I'm not sure how she'll ever explain it. There's a village here too, though. You might be interested to know. That's where I got my new boat. The little town lies beyond the cliffs of shining black stone and is occupied by a strange and curious folk indeed. They're not much for conversation, but that's a tale for another day, methinks. For now, though, I'll keep doing my duty. Together with my wife, we'll ensure the twin beams are always manned. And once a month on the very same night, the glittering door beyond the waves returns. As agreed with the echo of old Mad Jack, the fellow takes over the lighthouse for me. He doesn't mind, he can manage. It's only one night per month after all. And I sail across the waters. I sail across the waters to spend the night with my wife, through the glimmer of the glittering door. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Missing out on a show that everybody's talking about isn't an option for me. I'm constantly signing up for this streaming service or that one, and then a few months later, I realize that I've still been paying for the service long after I finished the show. Getting Rocket Money was a real game changer for me. They found my unwanted subscriptions and they even helped me cancel them, so I never had to worry about them slipping through the cracks again. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps today. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. I never thought that I would be the kind of person who would end up at Walmart. Not that there's anything wrong with it. People need jobs and Walmart needs people. It's just that I always imagined myself doing something different with my life by 25. Maybe working at some trendy startup or finishing grad school. Instead, I found myself filling out an application for the overnight stocking position at Walmart, located on the outskirts of West Branch, a small town that barely registered on most maps. Life has a way of humbling you. After my mom got sick and the medical bills started piling up, my fancy graphic design degree from a state university meant nothing. What mattered was a steady paycheck and health insurance. Walmart offered both. The hiring process was surprisingly quick. I submitted my application on a Tuesday and had an interview on Thursday, and by the following Monday, I was watching orientation videos in a cramped back room that smelled like microwave popcorn and industrial cleaner. The HR lady, Brenda, was pleasant enough, if a bit robotic in her delivery of company policies and expectations. "The night shift isn't for everyone," she said, sliding a folder across the table to me. "Hours are 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 days a week. You'll be responsible for stocking shelves, organizing inventory, and the occasional customer assistance. Though honestly, we don't get many customers after midnight." I nodded, thinking about how I would need to completely flip my sleep schedule. But the extra $1.50 an hour for overnight work would make a difference in my mom's pharmaceutical costs. "One more thing," Brenda said, her voice dropping slightly as she pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't printed on Walmart letterhead like everything else had been. Instead, it was a plain white page with typed text. "These are the special protocols for overnight staff at this location. Consider them additional store policies." The paper listed 5 rules. Rule 1. All overhead lights will dim at exactly 2:13 a.m. for approximately 17 minutes. Remain in your assigned section during this time. Do not use flashlights or phone lights. Rule 2. If you hear your name called over the intercom between midnight and 5 a.m., do not respond. Continue working. If the calling persists, hum any commercial jingle that you can remember. Rule 3. The family restroom near Sporting Goods is off limits to all night shift employees. Use only the facilities at the front of the store. Rule 4. If you encounter a customer who appears to be sleepwalking, inform a manager immediately using Walkie Channel 3. Do not touch them or block their path. Rule 5. If you find merchandise arranged in a perfect circle anywhere in the store, do not disturb it. Radio a manager with code phrase, "Section reset needed." I read the rules twice, waiting for Brenda to crack a smile and tell me that it was all a prank they played on new hires. but her expression remained serious. "These are non-negotiable," she said firmly. "Failure to comply with these protocols is grounds for immediate termination. Do you understand? Is this some kind of joke?" I asked. Brenda's face hardened. "No, it is not. These rules exist for the safety of our employees and our customers. Do you understand them?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I understand." "Good. Sign at the bottom, please." I signed, feeling a flutter of unease. But I needed this job, and every workplace had its quirks, right? Maybe this was some weird corporate loss prevention strategy, or a way to deal with a particular breed of strange customer that shopped in the middle of the night. I was assigned to work with Mickey, a stocky guy in his 30s who had been with Walmart for nearly a decade. He would train me for my first week. "You read the special rules?" he asked as he showed me how to use the inventory scanner. "Yeah," I replied. "What's that all about? Some kind of security thing?" Mickey glanced around before answering, despite the store being empty except for a few other night staff. "Just follow them, okay? Don't ask too many questions. It's better that way." I wanted to press him for more information, but his closed-off body language made it clear the topic was finished. Instead, I focused on learning the scanner system and the proper way to stock shelves. My first few nights were uneventful. The work was physically demanding but straightforward. Unbox products, check inventory, stock shelves, break down cardboard. Repeat until shift end. The store had an eerie quality to it at night. The two bright fluorescent lights, the endless expanse of empty aisles, the occasional echoing footsteps of another employee somewhere unseen. The only customers were either insomniacs grabbing late-night necessities or third-shift workers from nearby factories, stocking up during their lunch breaks. They rarely needed help, which suited me fine. I was still learning where everything was located at in the store. It wasn't until my fourth night that I experienced the first rule in action. I was in the cereal aisle methodically arranging boxes of Cheerios when the lights above me dimmed substantially. The sudden change made me jump, nearly dropping the box in my hands. I glanced at my watch. 2:13 exactly. My first instinct was to pull out my phone for light, but Mickey's voice echoed in my head. "Just follow them, okay?" I stood frozen, barely able to make out the shapes of the cereal boxes. The entire store had taken on a twilight quality. Not pitch black, but dim enough that details were difficult to discern. I decided to continue working by feel, keeping my movement slow and measured. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming down the main aisle that intersected with mine. They had an odd cadence, like somebody dragging one foot slightly. I held my breath, listening as the footsteps grew closer. They stopped at the end of my aisle. I couldn't see clearly in the dim light, but I could make out a tall figure standing there. It appeared to be wearing the standard Walmart vest, but something was off about its proportions. The shoulders too broad, the head too small. The figure stood motionless. I remained equally still, my heart hammering in my chest. After what seemed like an eternity, the figure turned and continued down the main aisle, the dragging footsteps sound fading away. I released my breath, realizing that I had been holding it so long that my lungs burned. Exactly 17 minutes after they had dimmed, the lights returned to full brightness. I blinked at the sudden illumination, quickly looking around. There was no sign of the figure that I had seen and no other employees nearby. When my shift ended, I caught up with Mickey in the break room. "Hey, about my last shift, the lights dimming at 2:13, I said quietly. "I saw someone or something." Mickey immediately tensed. "We don't talk about that," he replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Just follow the rules, that's all you need to know." "But..." "Listen," he cut me off, leaning in. Everyone who works here has seen things, weird things, but the ones who make it are the ones who just follow the rules and mind their own business. Understood. I nodded, troubled by his reaction. As I was leaving, he called after me. "Oh, and Jamie, start bringing headphones. Music helps during that time. Just don't use the light on your phone." Over the next few weeks, I settled into the routine of night shift work. My body adjusted to sleeping during the day and I became more efficient at stalking. The rules remained a constant background presence in my mind, but nothing unusual happened. Until the intercom incident. It was a slow Tuesday night. We had a light truck delivery, so most of us had finished our stocking early and moved on to zoning, the process of pulling products to the front of shelves and making everything look neat and organized. I was in the health and beauty section, methodically arranging bottles of shampoo when the intercom crackled to life. "Jamie." A woman's voice called, sweet and melodic. "Jamie, could you please come to the service desk? Jamie, to the service desk, please." I froze, remembering Rule 2. The store's customer service desk closed at 10 p.m. when the night shift began. There shouldn't be anybody there to call for me. I continued arranging shampoo bottles, trying to ignore the summons, but my hands had begun to shake. 30 seconds later, the intercom crackled again. "Jamie," the voice said, no longer sweet but sharper, more insistent. "You're needed urgently at the service desk. Jamie, to the service desk, now, please." I hummed the first commercial jingle that came to mind. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, under my breath, focusing intently on the bottles in front of me. "Jamie." The third call made me jump. The voice had changed completely, dropping several octaves into a growl that didn't sound human at all. The intercom system emitted a high-pitched whine of feedback. I hummed louder, hands trembling so badly now that I knocked over a row of conditioner bottles. The jingle wasn't working, and so I switched to another, that old Meow Mix commercial, humming more forcefully. A hand touched my shoulder and I nearly screamed. "Hey, you good?" It was Daryl, one of the other Night Stalkers. "You're humming pretty loud." "Did you hear that? On the intercom?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Daryl's expression shifted subtly. "Hear what?" "Somebody called my name 3 times. He glanced around and then lowered his voice. "Huh, first time." I nodded. "It happens to everyone eventually. It's different for each person. Some hear family members, some hear bosses from old jobs. The important thing is you didn't answer or go to the service desk." "What happens if I do?" I couldn't help asking. Daryl shook his head. "A girl named Monica found out about 6 months before you started. She's not with us anymore." "She quit?" His expression darkened. "Something like that." After that shift, I couldn't sleep despite the blackout curtains in my apartment. I kept hearing that final growling version of my name whenever I closed my eyes. Instead of forcing sleep, I opened my laptop and searched for information about the Walmart that I worked at. Most of the results were benign. Job postings, store hours, the occasional complaint about service on Yelp or Google. But on the 3rd page of results, I found a link to a local news article from 3 years ago. Missing Walmart employee case remains unsolved. The article was brief, describing how a night shift employee named Jack Alexander had disappeared during his shift. Security cameras showed him entering the family restroom near Sporting Goods at approximately 3:15, but there was no footage of him exiting. Police had found no signs of foul play and the case remained open but inactive due to the lack of evidence. The family restroom near Sporting Goods. Rule 3. I searched for more information about Monica, the employee that Daryl had mentioned, but I found nothing. Expanding my search to include missing persons in West Branch over the past year yielded no results for anybody by that name. I was about to give up when I noticed a community forum for local residents and a thread about local job opportunities. I found a comment from a user named Big Mama 82. Wow, what a name. Avoid the night shift at the Walmart on Route 75. My daughter worked there for 2 months and started having severe psychological issues. She claimed that the store was different at night and that something was hunting the employees. She quit after having a complete breakdown. It's been nearly a year of therapy and medication, and she still wakes up screaming about the lights going out in circles on the floor. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. What exactly was going on at that Walmart? Were the rules actually protecting us from something, and if so, what? The next night at work, I tried to act normal despite my growing anxiety. I noticed things that I hadn't before. How the night managers always worked in pairs, never alone. How certain sections of the store had small, inconspicuous symbols drawn at the corners of the floor tiles. How everyone wore a small pin on their vest that wasn't standard Walmart issue, a tiny blue star. During our break, I cornered Mickey in the smoking area outside the employee entrance. "Tell me what's really going on here," I demanded. I found articles about missing employees, posts about people having breakdowns. This isn't normal. Mickey took a long drag of his cigarette, considering me carefully. "How long have you been here now? A month? 5 weeks?" He nodded. "And you've always followed the rules?" "Of course." You're doing better than most. Look, this location has issues. Been that way since they built it." "What do you mean, since they built it?" Mickey dropped his cigarette, crushing it under his boot. "You ever wonder why this place is so far from the center of town? Why they put a Walmart in the edge of that forest instead of closer to the highway exit where all the other retail is?" I hadn't, but now I was curious. "This land was cheap because nobody would develop it. Local tribes wouldn't go near it. Early settlers had avoided it. Even the logging companies skipped this patch when they cleared most of the surrounding forest. Why? Old stories, bad ground, thin places," he shrugged. "Whatever you want to call it, all I know is corporate got a good deal, ignored the warnings, and now we have the rules." "So these rules, they keep us safe from what exactly?" Mickey fidgeted with his blue star pen. "You ask too many questions, Jamie. That's how people get into trouble. Just follow the rules, collect your paycheck, and try not to think too much about the rest." That shift, I did the exact opposite, and I couldn't stop thinking about Mickey's warning as I restocked the dairy section. The coolers hummed monotonously, a sound that usually faded into background noise, but tonight it seemed ominous, almost like a distant whispering. At 1:45, Diane, one of the night managers, approached me with unusual urgency. "We need extra hands in the garden center," she said, already turning to walk away. "Follow me." The garden center was on the far side of the store, partially outdoors but enclosed with high fencing and a greenhouse-style roof. At night it was closed to customers, the doors to the exterior locked and alarmed. When we arrived, I saw why Diane needed help. In the center of the concrete floor, dozens of potted plants had been arranged in a perfect circle. Soil from several broken pots was scattered around, and in the center of the circle sat a single garden gnome figurine facing the eastern fence. Section reset needed in the garden center. Within minutes, the other night manager, Leonard, arrived with a strange metal box. He wore thick gloves as he opened it, revealing what looked like coarse salt mixed with dried herbs. "Stand back," Leonard instructed, walking slowly around the circle of plants, sprinkling the mixture just outside its perimeter. Once complete, he placed a small white candle at 4 points around the circle, aligned with a compass's directions. I watched in disbelief as he lit each candle and then began speaking in a language that I didn't recognize, something guttural and ancient sounding. Diane noticed my expression. "First circle?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to form words. "Somebody has to reset it before dawn or things get worse. Much worse," she explained. Who arranged the plants like this?" I finally managed to ask. Diane's expression was grim. "Not who, what?" After Leonard finished up with the strange ritual, he and Diane carefully dismantled the circle, making sure not to disturb the salt mixture. The plants were returned to their proper places, the broken pots and spilled soil cleaned up. The gnome figurine was placed in Leonard's metal box. "We'll need to monitor this section closely for the next few nights," Diane told me. "If you're assigned here, be extra vigilant and report anything unusual immediately." "What should I be looking for?" I asked. "Merchandise moving on its own, cold spots, the smell of wet earth even though nothing's been watered." She hesitated and then added, "And if you hear digging sounds from beyond the fence, radio immediately and leave the area." That night it marked a turning point. It became impossible to pretend that this was just a normal job with some crazy policies. Something was happening here, something beyond ordinary explanation. I started paying closer attention to my colleagues, noting their behaviors and reactions. Some, like Mickey, seemed resigned to the strangeness, accepting it as a part of the job. Others displayed various coping mechanisms. Trisha from Housewares wore religious symbols from at least 5 different faiths around her neck. Dennis from Electronics muttered protection prayers under his breath whenever he had to walk through certain sections alone. Lacey from Health and Beauty would only communicate through written notes between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., claiming, "They can't track what you don't say out loud." I began keeping a journal, documenting these strange occurrences. Night 37. Lights dimmed at 2:13 as usual. Heard dragging footsteps again, but also a soft clicking sound, like fingernails on tile. Temperature in frozen foods dropped to near zero, causing frost to form on the outside of the freezer doors. Night 39. Found a perfect circle of cereal boxes in aisle 7. Followed protocol and called for reset. Leonard responded, performed the usual ritual. I noticed that he used different colored candles this time, black instead of white. Night 42. Someone called my name over the intercom again. It was a female voice, different from last time. When I didn't respond, I heard something that sounded like a child crying from the direction of the garden center. Night 45. The lights didn't come back on after the 17 minutes. Extended darkness lasted for an additional 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Multiple footsteps could be heard throughout the store. Diane was on walkie-talkie instructing everyone to stay perfectly still and close your eyes. I knew that I should quit. I mean, any rational person would have walked out after experiencing even a fraction of what I had witnessed. But the truth was, I couldn't afford to. My mother's condition had worsened, requiring more expensive treatments. The health insurance from Walmart was keeping her alive, and perversely, they had started giving me more hours and even a small promotion to night lead in grocery, which came with a $1 raise. It was as if the store, or whatever controlled it, was rewarding me for my compliance. 2 months into my employment, I was assigned to train a new hire named Chris. He was a college student taking a semester off, jovial and talkative. I liked him immediately, which made what had happened even worse. "So what's with the weird rules they gave us?" he asked as I showed him how to stock the frozen section. "Is it some kind of hazing thing?" "No," I said firmly. "Those rules are serious. You need to follow them exactly." Chris laughed. "Oh, come on, man. Don't use the bathroom by the sporting goods section. Don't answer if somebody calls your name. It sounds stupid to me." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him directly. "Listen to me carefully, this isn't a joke. People have vanished from this store. Bad things happen when the rules are broken." Something in my expression must have convinced him because his smile faded. Oh, for real? What kind of bad things? I don't know everything, I admitted. Just promise me that you'll follow them, okay? He nodded, suddenly serious. Okay, yeah, I promise. We continued working and Chris seemed to take my warning to heart. At 2:13, when the lights dimmed, he followed my lead, standing still and silent in our aisle. I could sense his fear, but he remained composed until the lights had returned. What was that all about? He whispered afterward. I don't know, but we're safe if we follow the rules. Everything went smoothly until about 4 a.m. when Chris mentioned needing to use the restroom. Hey, use the ones at the front, I reminded him. Yeah, I remember, he said, heading toward the front of the store. I continued working, but after 15 minutes I realized that Chris hadn't made it back. A knot formed in my stomach. I tried to reassure myself, maybe he had gotten distracted talking to another employee, or perhaps Diane had given him something to do. I radioed for him. No response. I walked to the front restrooms. Empty. A terrible suspicion grew within me. I made my way across the store toward sporting goods. The family restroom door was closed, the occupied sign showing red. Chris? I called, knocking gently. Are you in there? No answer. I tried the handle. It was locked. Heart racing, I radioed for a manager. Possible Rule 3 violation, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Family restroom by sporting goods. Diane and Leonard arrived within minutes, keys in hand and expressions grim. How long? Leonard asked. At least 20 minutes, I replied. They traded glances. Too long, Diane murmured. Leonard unlocked the door with his master key, but before opening it, he turned to me. Wait here, don't come in no matter what you hear, understand? I nodded, throat too dry to speak. They entered the restroom, closing the door behind them. At first, there was silence, and then I heard muffled voices, Leonard's deep tones speaking those strange words again, Diane responding in kind. A sudden crash made me jump, followed by what sounded like rushing water. And then came the screaming. It wasn't Chris's voice, it wasn't human at all. A high, keening wail that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I covered my ears, but it did little to block the terrible sound. After what seemed like an eternity, silence fell. The door opened and Leonard emerged alone, his Walmart vest torn and soaking wet. Dark liquid that didn't look like water dripped from his sleeves. Where's Diane? I asked. Where's Chris? Leonard's eyes were vacant and shell-shocked. Diane is handling it. The boy crossed over. We couldn't bring him back. What does that mean? What happened to him? He's gone, Leonard said flatly. We'll tell his family he never showed up for his shift. The company will take care of it. Take care of it? We need to call the police, I insisted. Leonard grabbed my arm, his wet fingers leaving burning cold marks on my skin. Hey, listen carefully, there's nothing the police can do. Chris is somewhere else now. Somewhere that they can't reach. Somewhere we can't reach. I don't understand. You don't need to understand, you just need to follow the rules. He released my arm. Go home, your shift is over. Don't come back until tomorrow night. But that's an order. And Jamie, don't write this in your little journal. Some things shouldn't be recorded. I stared at him, shocked that he knew about my private journal. He smiled grimly. We see more than you think. Now go home. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the local library, which opened at around 9, and I used their computers to research the history of the land where Walmart was built. Most of the information was mundane. Property records showing the land had been sold to Walmart's parent company 15 years ago by a local farming family. Before that, it had been undeveloped for as long as records exist. But in the Historical Society's archives, I found references to the area in settlers' journals from the 1840s. They called it the hollow ground or the waiting place, and they avoided it entirely. One account described a trapper who had set up camp there disappearing, leaving behind only a perfect circle of his possessions around a cold fire pit. Indigenous histories were harder to find, but I discovered an interview with a local tribal elder from the 1970s who had mentioned the area as a thin ground, a place where the other side presses close, and spoke of ancient protocols to keep those who wait below from crossing over. By the time I left the library, my hands were shaking. The connections were too strong to ignore. The rules at Walmart weren't arbitrary. They were a modernized version of old protections against whatever existed in that place. I really should have quit then. I should have walked away and never looked back. But I still needed the money, and more than that, I needed answers. That night, I returned to work. Chris's disappearance had been handled exactly as Leonard had said. The official story was that he had never shown up for his shift and that he was marked as a no-call, no-show in the system. When I asked other employees about him, they either didn't remember him or pretended not to. Only Mickey acknowledged what had happened. "You were training him, right?" he asked during our break. "The kid who used the wrong bathroom." I nodded, relieved that somebody else remembered. "That's how it goes sometimes," Mickey said, his voice heavy with resignation. "The rules are there for a reason." "But what happened to him?" I pressed. "Leonard said that he crossed over. What does that mean?" Mickey was silent for a long moment. "You ever hear of liminal spaces? Thresholds between places?" I nodded. "This store, this whole lot is built on a place like that, a threshold. The rules keep us on this side. Break them and you might end up on the other side." "The other side of what?" "I don't know, man, and I don't want to know. Why do you ask so many questions?" He tapped his blue star pen. "Have the managers given you one of these yet?" I shook my head. They will soon. It's kind of a protection, an old symbol. Means that you're a part of the knowing ones." "The what?" "Those who know and respect the rules. The ones who keep the balance." He glanced at the clock on the break room wall. "Oh, break's almost over. Just be careful. I think you're already in deeper than you realize." Mickey was right. The next night, Leonard called me into the management office and presented me with a small blue star pen. "You've been with us for 3 months now. You've seen things and you've followed the rules. It's time you became a full member of the night team." The pin looked ordinary enough, a 5-pointed star enameled in blue metal. But when I held it, it felt unusually heavy and cold to the touch. "What exactly does this mean?" I asked as I fastened it to my vest. "It means you're one of us now," Leonard replied. "It means you have certain responsibilities and certain protections." "From what?" Leonard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, from the consequences of working here. The pin marks you as belonging to this side. As long as you wear it while you're in the store, you'll be less noticeable to what dwells beyond the threshold. And if I don't wear it, well then you're on your own." He slid a folder across the desk. "These are your new duties. Study them carefully." The folder contained a more detailed version of the rules, plus some additional protocols. Extended Protocol 1. During light dimming at 2:13 to 2:30 a.m., employees must perform the acknowledgement. Stand still, eyes forward, and silently recite. "I see only what is mine to see. I hear only what is mine to hear. I remain on this side of the veil." Extended Protocol 2. Blue star pins must be worn at all times while on the premises. If a pin is lost, exit the building immediately and report to management next shift. Extended Protocol 3. If a customer appears with completely black eyes or is speaking in multiple overlapping voices, direct them to the garden center and immediately alert management with code phrase, special assistance in garden. Extended Protocol 4. Should you observe any employee violating the rules, do not intervene directly. Report to management immediately. Do not discuss the violation with the employee in question. Extended Protocol 5. In the event of a full threshold breach, announced as code white over the intercom, proceed immediately to the center of the store and form a circle with the other Blue Star employees. Remain in position until the all clear is given. I look up from the papers, my mouth dry. Has there ever been a full threshold breach? Leonard nodded grimly. And twice in the 15 years that this store has been open. Both times we contained it. Barely. Contained what? You don't want to know those details, Jamie. Trust me on that. He tapped the folder. Memorize these. Your life depends on it. And now that you're a Blue Star, you'll be expected to help with resets when needed. The circles, I said, like the plants in the garden center. Yes, among other things. Being a Blue Star employee changed things. Other night shift workers treated me differently, with a mixture of respect and wariness. I was included in conversations that would stop when non-Blue Star employees approached. Diane and Leonard assigned me to more sensitive areas of the store, places where incidents happened more often. I learned that certain sections were more problematic than others. Garden Center was the worst, being the closest to the exterior of the building and the forest beyond. Sporting goods with its hunting equipment and weapons was another hotspot. The family restroom was positioned as a confluence of what Leonard called threshold lines, invisible boundaries where the barrier between our world and whatever was on the other side grew thin. The work became more than just stocking shelves. I was taught how to recognize signs of threshold thinning, unexpected cold spots, electronic malfunctions, the smell of ozone or wet earth, merchandise that rearranged itself when nobody was looking. I learned to perform these minor resets, small rituals involving salt, iron filings, and specific words to strengthen the barrier when minor breaches occurred. These happened several times a week, usually small manifestations like products arranged in patterns or strange writing appearing on bathroom mirrors. All the while, I kept thinking about Chris and the others who had disappeared. Were they dead, or were they somewhere else as Leonard had suggested? Was there any way to bring them back? I began researching more intensely during my off hours, diving into books about liminal spaces, threshold theory, and ancient barrier rituals. I found striking similarities between the protocols that we followed at Walmart and protected practices from dozens of cultures throughout history. My mother had noticed the change in me. "You look exhausted, honey," she said during one of my visits to her at the care facility. "Is that job working you too hard?" "I'm good, Mom," I lied. "Just adjusting to the night schedule is all." She took my hand, her fingers frail but her grip surprisingly strong. "No, there's something different about you. Something in your eyes." She leaned closer. "You're seeing things, aren't you? Things that shouldn't be there." My breath caught. "What? What do you mean?" She sighed, a sound heavy with secrets. "Oh, the Mercer land. That's where you're working at, isn't it? That Walmart." "You know about the Mercer property?" I asked, shocked. "Oh, everybody from the old families know," she replied. "Your grandmother used to tell stories about the hollow ground, about the things that would happen there." "Why didn't you say anything when I took the job?" "Oh, I hope the stories were just that. Stories." She looked away. "And we needed the insurance." "Mom, people have disappeared there. Something is really happening at that store." "The veil is thin in that place," she murmured. "Always has been. That's why the rituals are important. The rules." "How do you know about those?" I was stunned. Not the specific ones that they use now, but every generation had them. Ways to stay safe on that land. She squeezed my hand. Jamie, listen to me. Be careful, don't get pulled in too deep. Those who spend too much time guarding the threshold eventually become a part of it. My mother's warning haunted me, but I couldn't walk away. Not just because of the financial necessity, but because I had become invested in understanding what was happening there. And if I'm being honest, I had started to feel a sense of purpose in my role as a guardian of sorts. A few nights later, I experienced my first major incident. It was just after 3 a.m. and I was working in the seasonal section, which had been converted for Halloween. Plastic skeletons, bags of candy, and costume displays filled the area. A celebration of the macabre that felt oddly trivial given what I now knew about real terror. I was arranging a display of pumpkin-scented candles when I felt a sudden drop in temperature. My breath fogged in front of me despite the store's heating system running at full blast. The scent of wet earth and decaying leaves filled the air. Following protocol, I reached for my walkie-talkie to report the warning signs of a threshold thinning. Before I could press the talk button, however, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A child's laugh, high and tinkling, coming from the next aisle over. We didn't allow children in the store after 10 p.m. No exceptions. I moved cautiously to the end of my aisle and peered around the corner. The Halloween costume section was dimly lit, the display of masks and makeup kits creating unsettling shadows. At first, I saw nothing off, but then I spotted her, a small girl perhaps 7 or 8 years old, standing with her back to me. She wore what looked like an old-fashioned nightgown, yellowed with age. Her hair hung in long dark tangles down her back. "Hello?" I called softly, remembering protocol. Children weren't explicitly mentioned in the rules, but my instincts screamed danger. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't respond. She was staring at a display of Halloween masks, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I raised my walkie-talkie, intending to call for a manager when the girl spoke. "They don't look real," she said, her voice sounding very strange, as if coming from much farther away than a few yards between us. "Not like the faces below." My finger hovered over the call button. "What faces?" I asked, buying time while trying to remember if there was a specific code phrase for child apparitions. She began to turn slowly, jerkily, like a wind-up doll with damaged gears. "Would you like to see? They're waiting for more. Always waiting for more." I pressed the button. "Code blue and Halloween, aisle 14. I said, using the general emergency phrase when unsure of the specific protocol. As the girl continued her unnatural turning motion, I caught a glimpse of her profile. Where her face should have been was only a smooth, blank surface of skin, featureless except for a single vertical line where a mouth might be. I backed away, my training momentarily forgotten in the face of pure terror. The girl, or whatever was wearing the shape of a girl, continued rotating until she faced me fully. The line where her mouth should be split open, widening impossibly into a gaping maw that stretched from where her hairline would be down to where her chin should end. From that cavernous opening came the child's laugh again, but it doubled and tripled upon itself, as if multiple children were laughing in imperfect unison. "Jamie," the voices said together, "we've been waiting for you. Don't you want to follow the rules? Rule number 6. When the children call, you must answer." "That's not one of the rules," I said, continuing to back away. "There are only 5 rules." The thing's head tilted even further, nearly touching its shoulder at an impossible angle. "On your side, perhaps." Leonard appeared beside me so suddenly that I almost screamed. He grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight, and thrust a small object into my hand, a tiny cloth bag filled with blue string. "Throw it," he commanded. "Now." I hurled the bag toward the child. When it hit the floor at the creature's feet, there was a sound like sizzling bacon and a flash of pale blue light. The temperature in the aisle instantly rose, and the smell of earth was replaced by the acrid scent of burnt hair. The child thing convulsed once, the gaping mouth snapping shut, and then between one blink and the next it was gone, leaving only a small, perfect circle of frost on the linoleum floor where it had stood. What was that thing? Leonard's face was grim. A scout. They send them through sometimes, testing for weakness. He pulled out a small vial of what looked like salt and carefully poured it in a circle around the frost mark. "This is the third one this month. The barrier is wearing thin." "What did you give me to throw?" "Iron filings, graveyard dirt, and St. John's wort. It's an old remedy." He finished the salt circle and straightened up. "Hey, you did well. Not everyone keeps their wits when facing their first manifestation." "It knew my name," I said, still shaken. Leonard nodded solemnly. "Yeah, they always do. It's part of how they try to establish connection. Use your name, make it personal. Try to add new rules that you'll follow without thinking." He patted his blue star pen. "This helps protect against their influence, but not completely." The child said something about faces below. What was that about? Leonard hesitated. "There are things that you're not ready to know yet, Jamie. Some knowledge is dangerous until you've been properly prepared." "I think I deserve to know what I'm facing," I insisted, "especially if it knows my name." He sighed heavily. "Fine, but not here. Meet me in the manager's office after we finish cleanup." Leonard was waiting for me when I arrived at the small office tucked behind the customer service desk. The room was different than I had remembered it from my initial interview. Symbols had been painted on the walls in dark blue, and a large map of the store was spread across the desk, marked with dozens of small red X's. "Sit," Leonard said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Not all blue stars are cleared for this level of information." I sat, noting the serious shift in his demeanor. Usually stoic, Leonard now appeared actually troubled. "This store, this entire structure was built as a containment mechanism," he began. "Not just a store. Walmart corporate knows what this land is, what it contains. And that's a threshold, right? Yes, a weak point between worlds." He pointed to the map. "These X mark the spot where the barrier is the thinnest. You've noticed that they cluster in certain areas, the garden center, sporting goods, the family restroom." I nodded. "What you may not have realized is that they form a pattern." He traced lines connecting the X's. A circle with 5 points of particular weakness. I stared at the resulting pentagram shape, like a 5-pointed star. Exactly like the pins that we wear. The symbol serves as both a warning and protection. Leonard leaned back. "The entity that spoke to you tonight is one of the many that exist on the other side. They want to cross over. To them, our world is nourishing. So the rules keep them from crossing. The rules keep us from inadvertently helping them cross. Each one addresses a specific vulnerability in the barrier." He ticked them off on his fingers. The dimming lights at 2:13. That's when the barrier naturally thins and they can see us better. We stay still and quiet to avoid drawing attention. And the names over the intercom. They can mimic voices and use these storage systems to call to us. Answering it acknowledges them, creates a connection that they can use to pull you partially across. The bathroom by sporting goods. It's positioned at a major weak point. Plus water, running water creates conduits that they can use. That's why we don't use that restroom. The sleepwalking customers. Leonard's expression darkened. Not customers at all. They're people who have been partially pulled across, Their consciousness is already on the other side, but their bodies remain here, caught between worlds. We don't interfere because touching them could pull you over too. And the circles of merchandise. They're attempts at creating portals. Circles have power. They're using our own products to create doorways. When we find them, we have to perform the reset ritual to close the potential opening before it stabilizes. I thought about this information, connecting it with my own experiences and research. The child thing had mentioned faces below. What did that mean? Leonard was silent for a long moment. The entities on the other side, they collect. Trophies, I suppose you could say. Faces are very prized. A chill ran through me as I thought of the featureless child with its gaping maw. From the people who disappear, like Chris. Yes, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The company knows the risks. It's why the pay and benefits are so good. It's why certain incidents are handled internally. This is insane, I said. Why not close the store, demolish it? Because the threshold would remain. Without the containment measures we have in place, it would grow, it would spread. The protocols don't just protect us, they protect everybody in West Branch. So we're the sacrificial lambs? I asked bitterly. No, we're the guardians. There's a difference in that. Leonard opened his desk drawer and removed an old leather-bound book. It's time you learn the deeper protocols, the ones that can save you if the worst happens. He placed the book in front of me. Its cover was unmarked, but the leather felt unusually warm to the touch, almost like skin. Study this, memorize the words and symbols. If you're ever caught in a full breach, this knowledge might be the only thing that brings you back. I took the book, feeling its weight, heavier than its size had suggested. Has anybody ever come back after being taken? Leonard's silence was answer enough. The book that Leonard gave me contained knowledge that both fascinated and terrified me. Written in multiple hands across generations, it documented the history of the hollow ground and the various entities that sought passage through the threshold. There were detailed accounts of manifestations dating back to the 1800s, rituals for strengthening the barrier, and emergency protocols for different types of breaches. Some pages contained symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly, while others featured diagrams of the land with notations in languages that I couldn't identify. The most disturbing section detailed what happened to those who had crossed over, willingly or not. According to the book, they didn't simply die. They were absorbed, their consciousness and physical forms separated and repurposed. The entities on the other side couldn't create their own bodies to cross over, so they needed ours. I read the book during my off hours, trying to process the nightmare reality that I had stumbled into. My work performance suffered as I struggled with sleep deprivation and constant anxiety. The only consolation was that my mother's treatments were working. She was showing signs of improvement, which meant my sacrifice was at least accomplishing something good. One afternoon, I awoke from a fitful sleep to find a text message from Diane. Emergency meeting tonight, all blue stars at 9 p.m. before shift. I arrived at the store an hour early, finding the parking lot unusually empty except for employee vehicles. The night crew was gathered in the training room, all 18 Blue Star members looking tense and uncertain. Leonard and Diane stood at the front, their expressions grave. Behind them was a whiteboard covered with symbols from the book, along with a timeline of some sort. Thank you all for coming, Leonard began once everybody had settled. We're facing an unprecedented situation. The barrier has been weakening steadily for months, and our standard measures aren't stabilizing it anymore. Murmurs spread through the room. Diane raised her hand for silence. We've recorded 17 minor breaches in the past week alone, she continued. The corporate containment team has analyzed the data and believes we're approaching a potential full threshold breach. The room went quiet. I felt Mickey tense beside me. When? Somebody asked. Tomorrow night, October 31st. Of course, Halloween, the day when the veil between worlds was traditionally the thinnest. We'll be implementing Emergency Protocol Omega, Diane said, pointing to a complex symbol on the whiteboard. Every blue star will be positioned at strategic points throughout the store. The building will be closed to customers from 8 p.m. onward, under the pretense of inventory. What about non-Blue Star employees? I asked. They've been given the night off, Leonard answered. This operation involves only initiated guardians. He distributed maps showing our assigned positions. I was placed in sporting goods near the family restroom, one of the major weak points. Each of you will maintain your position regardless of what you see or hear, Diane instructed. You'll be provided with barrier kits containing salt, iron, and other necessities. Under no circumstances are you to leave your assigned area until the all clear is given. And if the barrier fails completely, Mickey asked the question that everybody was thinking. Leonard's face was grim. Then we implement the final containment. The building has been prepared since its construction for this possibility. Prepared how? I asked. There are charges placed at structural points throughout the foundation, Diane said matter-of-factly. In the event of a complete breach, the entire building will be collapsed inward, sealing the threshold with concrete and steel. Shocked silence followed her statement. With us inside, somebody finally asked. Leonard nodded. If it comes to that, yes. Better 18 souls than the thousands who would be taken if the threshold entities established a permanent foothold in our world. I looked around the room, seeing the same realization dawn on every face. We weren't just night stalkers or sales associates. We were the last line of defense in a war that most people didn't even know was being fought. And we might not survive our next shift. I spent what might be my last day putting my affairs in order as best I could. I visited my mother, telling her that I loved her without revealing what was happening. I wrote letters to the few friends I had, vague explanations that wouldn't reveal the truth but might provide some closure. I made sure that my rent was paid through the end of the month. As the sun set, I drove to the Walmart one last time. The parking lot was empty except for the employee vehicles, the store's exterior lights dimmer than usual. A sign on the door read, "Closed for inventory" in large red letters. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Blue Star employees moved purposefully, setting up barrier materials at their assigned positions. Leonard and Diane were distributing small cloth bags similar to the one that had banished the child entity. Iron fillings, silver shavings, salt and herbs, Leonard explained as he handed me mine. Last resort if something manifests directly in your zone. Use it only if absolutely necessary. We have a limited supply. In addition to the bag, I received a small blue candle, a vial of clear liquid that smelled strongly of sage, and a piece of paper with words written in that strange language. Memorize these, Diane instructed. If the primary barrier fails, these words will be your personal protection. Speak them while visualizing a shield of blue light surrounding you. How will we know if the barrier is failing? I asked. You'll know, she replied grimly. Trust me. At exactly 11:30, we all took our positions. I stood in my assigned spot near the family restroom, the barrier materials arranged in a small semicircle before me. From here, I could see down several aisles but not to the other Blue Star positions. We were intentionally spaced to cover maximum area. At 11:45, the store's regular lighting shut off, replaced by emergency lights that cast everything in a dim blue glow. Over the intercom, Leonard's voice recited words from the book, a strengthening ritual that all of us silently joined, touching our Blue Star pins as we did. Midnight approached. I checked my watch nervously, wondering what exactly would happen when the clock struck 12 on Halloween night in a store built on a threshold between worlds. The answer came with a violent shudder that ran through the entire building. The floor beneath me vibrated, shelves rattling as products tumbled down. The emergency lights flickered wildly, and for a moment, I thought that I saw something in the flashes of darkness, shapes moving in the spaces where the light couldn't make it. My walkie-talkie crackled. "Hold positions," Leonard's voice commanded. "The first barrier is holding." The shaking subsided, but the air had changed. It felt heavier, charged with static electricity that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The smell of wet earth and decay filled the store, stronger than I had ever experienced it before. And then came the whispers. Hundreds of them overlapping, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I couldn't make out words, just a constant serration that made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. Something moved at the periphery of my sight, a dark shape sliding along the floor of the aisle to my left. When I turned to look directly at it, it vanished, only to reappear in another spot when I looked away. My walkie-talkie crackled again. "Zone 7 reporting manifestation," came Mickey's tense voice. "Multiple shadow forms in the garden center." "Zone 4 manifestation confirmed," another voice added. "Temperature dropping rapidly in electronics." "Maintain the barrier protocols," Diane responded. "Do not engage unless they enter your immediate area." I watched as the shadows grew bolder, sliding closer, taking more defined shape with each passing minute. They reminded me of people, or rather the negative space where people should be. Darkness given form and purpose. At 12:17, the first scream came over the walkie-talkie. "They're in through Zone 9. There." The transmission cut off abruptly. "Zone 9 report," Leonard demanded, but silence answered him. Another voice broke in, panicked. "Something's happening to the floor and housewares. Oh God, it's opening up." I wanted desperately to see what was happening in other parts of the store, but I knew leaving my position would weaken the overall barrier. I stood firm, watching as the shadows in my section grew more numerous and substantial. At 12:30, everything changed. The emergency lights failed completely, plunging the store into absolute darkness. In that moment of blindness, I felt something brush against my face. Cold, damp, like wet leather. I jerked back, nearly falling, and I fumbled for my flashlight despite the rules about using lights. Before I could turn it on, the emergency lights flickered back to life, revealing what was in front of me. The floor in the center of my zone had changed. The standard white tiles were now a deep, unnatural black that didn't reflect light. And worse, the blackness seemed to have depth, as if I was looking down into an abyss rather than at a solid floor. And from that darkness, something was emerging. It rose slowly, a mass of shifting shapes that never quite settled into a single form. One moment it appeared human-like, and the next it was a writhing collection of limbs and appendages that made no sense. The only constant was the faces. Dozens of them pressing outwards from the mass like masks embedded in clay. Their expressions frozen in terror or pain. With sick horror, I recognized one of them. Chris, his eyes wide and mouth open in a silent scream. The entity continued rising, more and more of it emerging from the impossible depth in the floor. As it towered over me, reaching nearly to the ceiling, I heard Leonard's voice over the walkie-talkie, calm but urgent. "Full breach confirmed. Initiate final containment. I repeat, initiate final containment." This was it. The building would be collapsed, sealing us in with these things forever. But before I could process my imminent doom, I heard another sound. My mother's voice, clear as day, cutting through the chaos. "Jamie, remember what I told you about the threshold?" It wasn't coming from the intercom or my walkie-talkie. It seemed to be speaking directly into my mind. What had she told me? That those who guard the threshold eventually become a part of it. but she had said something else, something about the old families and their knowledge. The massive entity before me extended what might have been an arm, ending in something between a hand and a claw. As it reached for me, I saw the blue star pin glowing with an intense light, holding the appendage at bay. But the protection was failing, the light dimming as the creature pressed forward. The hollow ground doesn't just take Jamie, it connects. Those caught between can always find their way home if they remember one thing. Thresholds work both ways. That's it. If they could come through to our side then. Acting on instinct and desperate hope, I grabbed my barrier supplies and threw them not at the entity but into the black depth in the floor. I followed with the blue candle lit by the electric blue light of my fading pen. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The blackness in the floor pulsed and the creature before me let out a sound that defied description. Part scream, part thunderclap, part the rending of reality itself. The pull was instant and overwhelming. The entity began to be dragged back toward the opening, its form distorting as it struggled against the suction. All around the store I could hear similar sounds as the breach began to reverse, but I was being pulled too. My feet slid on the smooth floor as the threshold's gravity seized me. I grabbed a shelf, holding on with all my strength as the vortex tried to claim me. Jamie! Leonard appeared at the end of the aisle, fear on his face as he saw what was happening. Let go of the shelf. The final containment has been triggered. You only have seconds to get out. The building had begun to shake violently, not from the breach but from the charges placed in the foundation. The collapse was beginning. The entity made a final desperate lunge toward me and I saw Chris's face stretched in its mass, his eyes suddenly focusing on mine with recognition. In that moment, I made my choice. I let go of the shelf and allowed the threshold to pull me forward, not to be claimed by the entity but to pass through to the other side, where perhaps I could find those who had been taken, where perhaps there was a way back that didn't involve letting these horrors into our world. As I fell into the blackness, time seemed to slow. I saw Leonard running toward me, Diane appearing behind him. I saw the ceiling beginning to crack as the charges detonated. I saw the entity being compressed and drawn back into the void along with me. And then I was through, falling into a space beyond understanding. I don't know how to describe where I am now. It's not a physical place in any sense that humans would comprehend. There are no walls or floors or ceilings, no up or down. There is light, but no source for it. There are sounds, but they come from everywhere and nowhere. And there are others here. Chris, Monica, dozens more who were taken over the years. They exist in a strange half state, neither fully conscious nor truly gone. I've learned things in this place, terrible truths about the entities in their world, about why they want to cross over. Our reality is vibrant, dynamic, and rich with energy. Theirs is fading, dying, the last embers of a universe approaching heat death. And they don't take faces as trophies. They take them to remember what it was like to have form, definition, and identity. They are ancient beyond understanding, the last survivors of a reality nearly exhausted. But most importantly, I've learned that my mother was right. Thresholds work both ways. Being caught between worlds doesn't mean being trapped forever, it means having access to both sides. The Walmart is gone, collapsed into rubble that was later cleared away and paved over as a parking lot for a new strip mall. The threshold remains, but it's sealed more effectively than before, buried under concrete and steel and tar. Yet there are other thresholds, other hollow grounds where the veil thins. Places where those caught between might find their way back if they're ever clever and determined enough. I'm searching for one now, gathering the scattered consciousness of Chris and the others as I go. I will find a way to bring us home. So if you work in retail, especially the night shift, pay attention to the rules that they give you. They might seem strange, arbitrary, and even silly, but follow them anyway. Because some stores are built on the wrong ground, and some places should have been left hollow, and some entities are still hungry for new faces to remember. I've never been very lucky. When I was 5, I fell into a well during a family picnic. At 12, I broke both arms trying to prove that I could fly by jumping off of our garage roof. At 16, I crashed my first car the day after getting my license. And when I turned 21 last month, I lost my apartment, my girlfriend, and my college scholarship all in the same week. So when I saw the help wanted sign in the grimy window of Gustav's Fine Dining, I wasn't exactly expecting my luck to change. I just needed a job, any job, because 3 weeks of sleeping in my Honda Civic had me desperate enough to try anything. The restaurant itself didn't look promising, tucked between an abandoned laundromat and a pawn shop in the worst part of town. Its weathered brick exterior and flickering neon sign screamed, "Health Code Violation." The windows were tinted so dark that they were nearly black, and the heavy wooden door had more locks than seemed necessary for any legitimate business. But beggars can't be choosers, and so I pulled open the door and I stepped inside. The interior was nothing like I expected. Where I anticipated sticky fluorescent cockroaches, I found polished mahogany and crisp white tablecloths. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling that seemed impossibly high for the building's exterior dimensions. The air smelled of something that I couldn't quite place. An odd mixture of expensive perfume, rare spices, and something metallic and raw. The host who had greeted me was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire car. He was tall, unnaturally so, with skin so pale that it was almost translucent. When he smiled, his teeth seemed just a bit too numerous, too sharp. "May I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying a strange accent that I couldn't place. "I saw the sign," I replied, suddenly feeling underdressed in my worn jeans and faded t-shirt. "About the job." His smile widened, revealing even more of those unsettling teeth. "Ah, excellent. We've been searching for a new attendant. Follow me, please." He led me through the dining room, which was empty despite it being dinner time. I noticed the tables were arranged in peculiar configurations, some absurdly large and others bizarrely small. Some had chairs that looked normal enough, while others had what appeared to be custom furnishings, reinforced benches, unusually high stools, and what looked like cushioned troughs. We passed through a set of swinging doors into a kitchen that gleamed with stainless steel and state-of-the-art equipment. But something was off. The knives were too large, the freezer secured with heavy padlocks, and there were strange symbols etched into the handles of pots and pans. In a small office off the kitchen sat a man who I assumed was Gustav himself. He looked ordinary enough. Middle-aged, slightly overweight, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. It was his eyes that gave me pause. They were entirely black, no whites visible at all. "This is the applicant, sir," the host announced before gliding out and closing the door behind him. Gustav gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. "You need work," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "And you're desperate." Again, not a question. I swallowed hard. "I am." He nodded as if confirming something to himself. "The position pays well, very well. $500 per night, cash. No taxes, no paperwork." My heart raced. That kind of money would get me back on my feet in no time. But there had to be a catch. "What would I be doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. And Gustav leaned forward. Serving, cleaning, basic restaurant duties. Nothing complicated. That's it? For $500 a night? He smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his pitch-black eyes. The job has its challenges. Our clientele is exclusive, and they have unique needs and expectations. Oh, like celebrities or something. He chuckled, a dry sound like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. Or something. You'll work from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., Wednesday through Sunday. You'll receive specific instructions which you must follow precisely. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. These are the rules. Memorize them. I looked down at the page. Written in elegant script were 5 numbered rules. Rule number 1. Never look the customers directly in the eyes. Rule number 2. Never touch the customers, even if asked. Rule number 3. Never consume anything on the premises. Rule number 4. Never enter the basement. Rule number 5. Never, under any circumstances, remain in the building after 4:05 a.m. Simple enough, I thought. Weird, but simple. So, do you accept the position? And Gustav asked. Common sense told me to walk away. Something was clearly off about this place, but the thought of another night sleeping in my car or having to drop out of college permanently, of never getting my life back on track, it all outweighed my apprehension. I accept, I said, sealing my fate. And Gustav's smile widened. Excellent. You start tonight. My first night at Gustav's began with a uniform, a crisp white shirt, black vest, and black pants that fit me perfectly, though I didn't recall giving anybody my measurements. The host, who introduced himself as Reginald, gave me a brief tour of the restaurant, pointing out the dining areas, the bathrooms, which had strange symbols on the doors instead of the usual indicators, and the kitchen. You'll primarily be clearing tables and assisting our regular servers, he explained. Under no circumstances are you to take orders directly from the customers. Why not? I asked. Reginald's expression tightened. Rule number 2, never touch the customers even if asked. Taking orders often involves physical interaction. Our regular staff are better equipped to handle such situations. I nodded, though his explanation raised more questions than it answered. At precisely 10 p.m., the first customers arrived. I heard them before I saw them. A strange shuffling sound accompanied by what seemed like the clicking of multiple hard-soled shoes on the marble floor. When I turned to look, though, I felt my blood run cold. What entered the restaurant was not human, not even close. It was tall, at least 8 feet, with skin like polished obsidian. It moved on 4 backward jointed legs while 2 long arms ended in hands with far too many fingers. Its head was elongated with no visible eyes or nose, just a wide slit where a mouth should be. I quickly averted my gaze, remembering rule number 1. My heart hammered in my chest and I had to grip the edge of the table that I had been clearing to keep from collapsing. Reginald glided forward, bowing deeply to the creature. Your usual table, honored guest. The thing made a series of clicking noises that somehow Reginald seemed to understand. He led it to a large circular table in the corner, where the chair had been replaced by what looked like a nest of cushions on the floor. As the night progressed, more customers arrived. Some were vaguely humanoid while others defied description entirely. There was a pair of small, childlike beings whose skin seemed to shift and ripple like water. A massive, bulbous entity that exuded a sweet, rotting smell, and a trio of what looked like ordinary businessmen, until they removed their hats to reveal spiraling horns. I kept my head down, focusing on my tasks. I cleared dishes containing half-eaten meals that looked nothing like food should look. I wiped tables clean of substances that moved on their own accord. I carried trays of drinks that glowed, smoked, or sometimes seemed to whisper. And through it all, I carefully followed the rules. When one of the customers, a spindly, multi-armed creature with skin like parchment, tried to make eye contact, I immediately looked at the floor. When another, a being seemingly composed entirely of writhing shadows, extended what might have been a hand toward me, I stepped back, maintaining distance. When Reginald offered me a glass of what he called the house specialty, a crimson liquid that pulsed like a heartbeat, I politely declined. When I accidentally dropped a tray near a door marked with a symbol I recognized as leading to the basement, I quickly retreated without investigating the strange sounds emanating from below. And when the antique clock in the dining room struck 4 a.m., I helped with final cleanup, changed back into my regular clothes, and I was out the door by 4:03. As promised, Gustav handed me 5 crisp $100 bills as I left. "You did well for your first night," he said. "Return tomorrow." I nodded, too shocked by what I had experienced to speak. As I walked to my car, I kept expecting to wake up. I mean, this had to be a dream. A bizarre, terrifying dream brought on by stress and sleeping in a cramped vehicle. But the money in my pocket was real, and so it seemed was everything else. By my 3rd night at Gustav's, I had almost adjusted to the strangeness. Almost. I had found a cheap motel room with the money that I had earned, giving me a real bed to sleep in during the day. I was beginning to recognize some of the regulars at the restaurant, and I had developed a system for avoiding direct eye contact while still being able to do my job efficiently. That night, a new customer arrived, if you could even call it that. It entered the restaurant not through the door but by seeping through the floorboards like black oil. It coalesced into a roughly humanoid shape, though its proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, torso too thin, neck bending at impossible angles. Reginald greeted it with the same professional courtesy that he showed all guests, leading it to a secluded booth in the far corner. Throughout the evening, I noticed him delivering plate after plate to this customer, each one piled high with what looked like raw meat. As I was clearing nearby tables, I accidentally knocked over a glass, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound caused the oil-like entity to turn sharply in my direction. For a brief moment, our eyes met, or rather, my eyes met the empty voids where its eyes should have been. I quickly looked away, remembering rule number 1, but it was too late. I felt a strange pressure in my head, like someone was squeezing my brain. The room started to spin, and I had to grab the edge of a table to steady myself. "Excuse me," I mumbled, hurrying toward the kitchen. I pushed through the swinging doors and leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My vision swam, and strange whispers echoed in my ears. Words in a language that I had never heard but somehow almost understood. "You broke rule number 1, came a voice beside me. It was one of the irregular servers, a woman named Lydia. Unlike Reginald and Gustav, she appeared completely human, petite with short blonde hair and green eyes. But there was something about her that still seemed off, though I couldn't put my finger on what. It was an accident. She handed me a small vial containing a blue liquid. "Drink this, it'll help." I hesitated, remembering rule number 3, never consume anything on the premises. "It's medicine, not food," she explained, as if reading my thoughts. "An exception to rule number 3. Otherwise, you're not going to make it through your shift." Desperation won out. I uncorked the vial and downed its contents in one gulp. It tasted like mint and something metallic, but the effect was immediate. The pressure in my head subsided and the whispers faded. "Better?" Lydia asked. I nodded. "What was that thing? and what did it do to me? "Oh, Mr. Thorne is a valued customer," she replied carefully. "His gaze can be intrusive. He likes to know who's serving him." "No, like read my mind." Lydia's expression became guarded. "You should get back to work and be more careful with the rules." I returned to the dining room, making a wide berth around Mr. Thorne's table. For the rest of the night, I could feel his attention on me, like icy fingers probing at the back of my skull. When 4 a.m. finally came, I changed and left as quickly as possible. In the parking lot, I noticed a dark, oil-like substance seeping under my car door. By the time that I reached the vehicle, it was gone, but a lingering smell like rotting flowers and copper hung in the air. That night, I dreamed of Mr. Thorne. In the dream, he stood over my bed, his form rippling and shifting, while he whispered words that made the air itself seem to curdle. I woke up drenched in sweat, with the distinct feeling that I wasn't alone in my motel room. But by then, it was nearly time for my next shift. "You've attracted attention," Gustav said on my 5th night as he handed me my uniform. "That's both good and bad." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "Some of our patrons are collectors of experiences, of sensations, of humans who intrigue them." He straightened my vest with hands that felt too cool and too smooth. "Mr. Thorne has expressed an interest in you." My stomach dropped. What kind of interest? "He's invited you to join him at his table tonight, as a guest, not a server." "I can't," I said quickly. "Rule number 2. "It would not apply in this case," Gustav interrupted. "You would be a guest, not an employee, for that portion of the evening." "And if I refuse?" Gustav's black eyes glittered. "That would be unwise. Mr. Thorne is not accustomed to rejection. Besides, you struck up this relationship by breaking rule number 1. Actions have consequences." I thought about quitting on the spot. I had enough money saved now to get by for a little while, but something in Gustav's expression told me that walking away might not be as simple as turning in my uniform. "What would I have to do?" I asked finally. "Just sit, converse. Mr. Thorne enjoys learning about humans, their hopes, their fears." Gustav smiled that not quite right smile. "Their nightmares." That evening at precisely midnight, Reginald escorted me to Mr. Thorne's table. The entity had taken on a more defined form than previous nights, almost human but with proportions that remained subtly wrong. He wore what appeared to be an expensive suit that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light. "Please sit," he said, his voice a disconcerting blend of multiple tones speaking at once. I sat across from him, careful to keep my eyes on the tablecloth. "You may look at me," Mr. Thorne said. "I've given permission. The rules are suspended between us for now." Reluctantly, I raised my gaze. What I had taken for a featureless face now had definition. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes like black holes, pulling in all light without revealing anything of what lay behind them. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Your fears in particular." I swallowed hard. "I'm just an ordinary person. I don't have any interesting fears." Mr. Thorne's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Everyone fears something. Death, failure, loneliness." He leaned forward slightly. "Being trapped." As he spoke that last word, I felt a sensation like spiderwebs brushing against my mind. Memories surfaced unbidden. Being stuck in that well when I was 5, the darkness closing in, the air growing thin, screaming until my voice gave out. "Ah," Mr. Thorne whispered. "Confinement. Suffocation. The terror of being aware is the last breath that leaves your body. He made a sound like satisfaction. Delicious. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't respond. It was as if invisible restraints held me in place. Our conversation isn't finished, Mr. Thorne said mildly. I barely tasted your fear. Please, I managed to say. I need to get back to work. Work can wait. Gustav understands the importance of keeping patrons like me satisfied. For what felt like hours, Mr. Thorne sifted through my memories, pulling out moments of terror, embarrassment, and dread, savoring them like fine wine. By the time he released me, I felt violated in a way I couldn't articulate, as if he had reached inside me and rearranged my thoughts. You may go, he said finally, but I'll see you again soon. I stumbled back to the kitchen where Lydia was waiting with another vial of blue liquid. Drink, she instructed, all of it. This time I didn't hesitate. The liquid burned going down, but it cleared my head and steadied my shaking hands. What does he want from me? I asked her. Lydia's expression was sympathetic but resigned. What they all want in one form or another. Sustenance. He feeds on fear. Mr. Thorne specializes in fear, yes. Others prefer different emotions or physical sensations. She touched my arm lightly. Be careful. Once they develop a taste for you, it's difficult to break free. That night, as I left the restaurant, I found a small, oil-like puddle by my car door again. And when I returned to my motel room, all the furniture had been subtly rearranged, everything just a few inches from where I had left it. The message was clear. Mr. Thorne could reach me anywhere. On my 10th night at Gustav's, I broke rule number 4. It wasn't intentional. I was carrying a tray of dirty dishes to the kitchen when I tripped over something, a tail or a tentacle, I wasn't sure, that extended into the aisle from under one of the tables. The tray went flying and I stumbled backward, crashing through a door that I hadn't noticed before. I found myself at the top of a staircase leading down into darkness, the basement. I knew that I should turn around immediately, but curiosity, that fatal human flaw, got the better of me. From below came strange sounds, rhythmic chanting, a wet slithering noise, and what might have been screams, though they sounded distorted, as if coming from underwater. Slowly, silently, I descended a few steps, just enough to peer into the gloom. What I saw made my blood freeze. The basement was vast, far larger than it should have been possible given the dimensions of the building above. It was lit by hundreds of candles that burned with an unnatural blue-tinged light. In the center of the space was a pit, and gathered around it were figures in hooded robes, some with distinctly non-human shapes beneath the fabric. They were engaged in some kind of ritual, chanting in the same strange language that I had heard in my head after meeting Mr. Thorne's gaze. And suspended over the pit was a man, an ordinary human like me, bound in what looked like living ropes that pulsed and tightened with each verse of the chant. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, because suddenly every hooded figure turned in my direction. The chanting stopped, and from the pit rose something that defied any description. A mass of writhing appendages surrounding a gaping maw lined with row upon row of needle-like teeth. I ran up the stairs, through the dining room, past startled customers, out the front door and into the night. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, terror making my hand shake so badly that I could barely put the key into the ignition. As I finally started the engine, I looked up to see Gustav standing in the restaurant doorway watching me. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed, as if I were a promising student who had failed an important test. I drove straight to my motel, threw my few possessions into my backpack, and checked out. I drove all night, putting as much distance as possible between myself and Gustav's fine dining. By the morning, I was 3 states away, exhausted but alive. I found another cheap motel and I collapsed onto the bed, hoping against hope that I had escaped whatever horror that I had witnessed. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I noticed something on the nightstand that hadn't been there when I had entered the room. A folded piece of paper with my name written on it in elegant script. With trembling hands, I unfolded it to find a message. "You broke rule number 4. There are consequences for such actions, but we are not unreasonable. Return to your position and all will be forgiven. Refuse and will be forced to collect what you owe in other ways. Your shift begins at 10 p.m. We expect punctuality. G." Beneath the message was an address, the address of the motel where I now stayed. They had found me somehow. They had found me within hours of my flight. I considered running again, but what was the point? If they could track me across 3 states in a matter of hours, then where could I possibly hide? That night at 9:45 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot of Gustav's fine dining, defeated and terrified. And Gustav was waiting at the door. "A wise decision," he said, holding out my uniform. "Mr. Thorne was particularly displeased by your departure. He's developed quite an appetite for your specific brand of fear." "What I saw in the basement," I began, "is none of your concern." Gustav cut me off. "You broke a rule and you've been given a second chance. Don't squander it." His black eyes bored into mine. "There won't be a third." 3 weeks had passed since my failed escape attempt. 3 weeks of serving inhuman customers, of feeling Mr. Thorne sifting through my fears like a child digging through a toy box, of wondering what exactly happened in the basement during those mysterious rituals. I had given up on running. Where would I go? How could I hide from creatures that could seep through floorboards and invade my dreams? Instead, I focused on survival, following the rules, keeping my head down, and saving money. But on this particular night, something was different. The restaurant was busier than usual with customers that I had never seen before. The air hummed with an energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "What's happening?" I asked Lydia as we passed in the kitchen. "The feast," she replied, her voice hushed. "It happens once a year." "What kind of feast?" Her eyes darted around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Just be careful tonight. Follow the rules to the letter." Throughout the evening, more and more patrons arrived, each stranger than the last. Some barely fit through the doors, and others seemed to exist partially in dimensions that I couldn't perceive, with sections of their bodies disappearing and reappearing at random intervals. At precisely midnight, Reginald struck a gong that reverberated through the restaurant with a sound that felt more like a physical force than a noise. The customers fell silent. Gustav emerged from his office, but he looked different. Taller, his skin now definitely green-tinged, those black eyes now glowing faintly. He wore a ceremonial robe similar to those that I had seen in the basement. "Honored guests," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that I hadn't heard before. "The time of the feast approaches. Our offering has been prepared. Please, proceed to the chamber." To my horror, the customers began moving toward the basement door, which now stood wide open. Gustav caught my eye and beckoned me forward. "You'll assist with serving during the feast," he said. "But rule number 4, I stammered. "Is suspended for tonight only," he finished. "Your presence is required." Reginald handed me a small golden tray bearing a single crystal goblet filled with a dark liquid that moved of its own accord. "Do not spill a drop," he instructed, "and whatever you see, whatever you hear, maintain your composure. The consequences for disrupting the feast are severe." Heart pounding, I followed the procession down the basement stairs. The space had been transformed since I had glimpsed it weeks ago. Now it glittered with bizarre decorations. What looked like constellations of tiny lights floating in midair, strange symbols that shifted and changed when viewed from different angles, and streamers made of what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with vibrant colors. The pit in the center was now covered by an intricate metal grate, and atop it stood a stone altar. And strapped to that altar was a man, different from the one that I had seen before, but in the same terrible situation. Unlike me, this man wasn't an employee. He wore expensive clothes and now torn and soiled. His face was bruised and his eyes were wild with terror. A gag prevented him from screaming, but his body strained against the restraints that held him down. "Behold our offering," Gustav announced. "Harold Whitmore, who built his fortune by destroying the sacred grounds where many of you once dwelled, who knowingly tore down the veil between worlds at 17 sites across this continent, who laughed when warned of the consequences of his actions." A murmur ran through the crowd, a blend of clicks, hisses, and sounds that no human throat could produce. "Tonight he pays his debt," Gustav continued. "Tonight, he feeds us all." I stood frozen, the goblet trembling in my hands, as Gustav produced a curved knife that gleamed not with reflected light, but with its own inner glow. "Wait," I said, the word escaping before I could stop it. The room fell silent. Every inhuman eye turned to me. Gustav's expression darkened. "You forget yourself, attendant." "You can't just kill him," I protested. "Kill?" Gustav looked genuinely puzzled. No one spoke of killing. He gestured toward the struggling man. "Harold will experience the consequences of his actions. He will nourish our patrons. But when the sun rises, he will return to his life physically unharmed." "Then what are you going to do to him?" "We feast on essence, not flesh," came a familiar, multi-toned voice. Mr. Thorne glided forward, his form more amorphous than usual, edges blurring into the shadows. "Fear, pain, regret, remorse, the emotions humans produce so abundantly. When extracted properly," Gustav added, "these essences regenerate. Harold will leave with no memory of tonight, only a lingering sense of atonement." I wasn't sure that I believed them, but I was in no position to argue. Not surrounded by countless inhuman entities, deep in a basement that defied the laws of physics, holding a goblet of what I now realized was probably not wine. The ritual began. Gustav used the knife not to cut Harold's flesh, but to make precise movements in the air above him. With each gesture, he drew out something visible, colorful wisps of energy that coalesced in the space above the altar. As these essences gathered, the patrons moved forward one by one, each consuming their preferred emotion. Some inhaled deeply, drawing the energy into themselves. Others extended appendages that absorbed the essences on contact. A few simply stood near the floating colors, seeming to derive nourishment from proximity alone. I watched in horrified fascination as Harold's expressions changed with each extraction, terror giving way to sorrow and then rage, and then a blank emptiness before the cycle began again. When my turn came to participate, I hesitated. "Offer the goblet to Mr. Thorne," Reginald whispered from behind me. "It's why you were brought here tonight." I approached the oil-like entity holding out the tray. Mr. Thorne's form solidified enough to grasp the goblet, which he raised in a toast-like gesture toward me. "Your contribution to tonight's feast is most appreciated. his voice somehow inside my head rather than in the air between us. A few drops of your exceptional fear freely given added delicate flavor that cannot be extracted by force. I realized with a jolt that the moving liquid in the goblet had come from me, harvested perhaps during my sleepless nights, my tension-filled shifts, or my nightmares of being trapped in that well. Mr. Thorne consumed the contents in one fluid motion, his form briefly taking on a blue glow that matched the color of the liquid. I felt a corresponding drain in my energy, as if a part of me had been consumed along with my bottled fear. The feast continued until nearly 4 a.m. By then, Harold lay still on the altar, not unconscious but empty, a vessel temporarily drained of all emotion. Gustav made a final gesture with the knife and the restraints fell away. "Return him," he ordered 2 robed figures. "As promised, he will remember nothing." As the guests filed out of the basement, satiated and in some cases visibly larger than when they had entered, Gustav approached me. "You did well tonight," he said. "Few humans witness the feast and maintain their composure." "Do I have a choice?" I asked bitterly. "There are always choices." He handed me my payment, not the usual 500 but 1,000. "Tonight you graduated from simple server to participant. Your value to the establishment has increased accordingly." I took the money feeling somehow complicit in whatever had happened to Harold Whitmore. "And one last thing," Gustav added. "Rule 5 is very important tonight. The energies stirred by the feast take time to settle. After 4:05, this place belongs to entities far less restrained than our usual clientele." I nodded, already planning to be out the door by 4:01. As I left that night, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten, I saw a black town car pull away from the alley behind the restaurant. Through its tinted windows, I caught a glimpse of Harold Whitmore, slumped but alive, being returned to his world, just as Gustav had promised. I wondered how many other powerful people had found themselves on that altar, paying for sins they couldn't even remember committing. And I wondered if someday I might find myself there too, not as a witness, but as an offering. 2 months had passed since the feast. My role at Gustav's had evolved. I was now trusted with more responsibilities, including helping prepare special orders in the kitchen, and occasionally translating for human guests who somehow found their way into the restaurant. Yes, there were human customers, rare but not unheard of. Most seemed to be occultists or thrill seekers who had learned of the restaurant through whispers in certain circles. They were treated with cautious courtesy, served mundane food and drink, and kept well away from the more dangerous patrons. I had even developed a sort of routine. I slept during the day in an apartment that I had rented with my money. I arrived at work each night at 9:30, donned my increasingly elaborate uniform, which now included strange symbols embroidered on the cuffs and collar, and I performed my duties with a professionalism that had earned me Gustav's approval. Mr. Thorne still requested my company once a week, still fed on my fears, but our sessions had developed an almost cordial quality. He no longer needed to restrain me or force his way into my mind. I had learned that resistance only made the experience more painful. I told myself that I was adapting, surviving, but deep down I knew the truth. I was becoming part of the restaurant, just another fixture in Gustav's strange menagerie. So that night began like any other. I served impossible dishes to impossible customers. I avoided eye contact, maintained professional distance, and I consumed nothing but the occasional medicinal blue liquid when the proximity to certain entities became too disorienting. But at approximately 2 a.m., something unprecedented happened. A raid. They burst through the front and back doors simultaneously, a dozen men and women in tactical gear wielding weapons and strange devices that emitted pulsing lights. They weren't police, their uniforms bore no insignia, just a simple symbol that matched one of the many etched into the kitchen equipment. Department of Extra Dimensional Containment, their leader announced, her voice amplified by some unseen means. All human personnel stand down. All non-terrestrial entities are hereby ordered to return to their plane of origin immediately. Chaos erupted. Some customers fled, their forms dissolving into mist, light, or nothingness. Others stood their ground, transforming into combat-ready configurations that made their previous appearances seem almost mundane by comparison. Gustav emerged from his office, his form now fully inhuman, towering, multi-limbed, his skin a mosaic of shifting patterns. "You dare," he roared, his voice shaking the chandelier. "This establishment exists under the protection of the Seventh Covenant. The Covenant was broken when you began targeting specific humans for emotional harvest," the leader replied. Harold Whitmore filed a complaint. I gaped in shock. Harold remembered. But Gustav had said. One of the agents spotted me. "Human," she shouted. "Get down." Before I could react, something grabbed me from behind. Reginald, his form also transformed, elongated arms wrapping around me like constrictors. "The human stays," he hissed. "He is bound to us now." What followed was bedlam. Flashes of light, sounds that defied description, screams both human and otherwise. I saw agents thrown across the room by invisible forces. I saw creatures that I had served for months reveal their true forms and the true extent of their powers. And through it all, Reginald dragged me toward the basement door. "Rule 5, he kept saying. "It's almost 4 a.m. We must secure you before then." I struggled against his grip, but his strength was inhuman. "Let me go," I shouted. "I'm not bound to you, I'm just an employee." "Foolish child," Reginald hissed in my ear. "Do you think the money was all that you were earning? Every night you worked here, every rule you followed or broken, every interaction with your patrons, especially your sessions with Mr. Thorne, they all have bound you to this place. Your essence is interwoven with the restaurant now." We reached the basement door, but before Reginald could open it, a blinding light engulfed us. One of the agents had fired some kind of energy weapon. Reginald's grip loosened as he shrieked, a sound like metal being torn apart, and I broke free. I ran toward the front door, dodging the chaos. An agent grabbed my arm. "This way," she shouted, pulling me toward the exit. Just as we had reached the door, a familiar oil-like substance seeped up through the floorboards. Mr. Thorne blocked our path. "This one belongs to me," he said, his voice causing the agent to stagger back, hands covering her ears. "No," I said, surprising myself with my defiance. "I don't belong to anyone." Mr. Thorne's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "After all this time, still so delightfully afraid. But now there's something new mixed in. Courage. How tantalizing." The agent recovered and raised her weapon. "Back off," she warned. Mr. Thorne ignored her, his attention fixed on me. "You've been such a reliable source of nourishment. I'm not ready to give that up." "Too bad," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I quit." I lunged past him, expecting to feel his cold grip catch me. Instead, I heard the agent's weapon discharge, and Mr. Thorne's form dispersed into droplets that scattered across the floor. "He'll reform," the agent said, pulling me through the doorway. "We need to move." Outside, more agents were creating some kind of perimeter around the building. Strange devices had been placed at intervals, generating a barely visible field that shimmered in the night air. "What's happening?" I asked as the agent led me to a black van parked across the street. "Containment protocol," she explained. "We're sealing the breach between dimensions that Gustav's restaurant represents. But the customers will be forced back to their native realms when we collapse the dimensional pocket." She looked at her watch. which needs to happen in the next 3 minutes. A chill ran through me. Before 4:05, I whispered. She shot me a sharp look. You know about that. Rule number 5, never remain in the building after 4:05 a.m. Smart rule, she nodded. When the clock strikes 4:05, the veil between dimensions is at its thinnest. That's when we strike. Other humans were being evacuated from the building, kitchen staff I recognized. A few human customers looking dazed and terrified, but I didn't see Lydia among them. There's someone still inside, I said. A server named Lydia, she helped me. The agent's expression hardened. There's no human server named Lydia. All staff have been accounted for. But I stopped as realization dawned. She seems so normal. Many of them can appear human when it suits them, the agent said. It's part of their mimicry. A commotion near the restaurant entrance caught our attention. Gustav himself emerged, still in his transformed state but now restrained by what looked like glowing chains. It took 6 agents to control him. This isn't over, he snarled, his voice somehow reaching us despite the distance. The Covenant protects us. There will be consequences. The agent beside me checked her watch again. 2 minutes, she muttered. As we watched, more creatures fled the building, some flying, others burrowing into the ground, a few simply vanishing with a pop of displaced air. The agents made no move to stop them, focusing instead on maintaining the perimeter. Why aren't you stopping them? I asked. Our mission was containment, not capture, she explained. We just need to close the breach that Gustav created. The entities themselves will be dealt with by other departments if they choose to remain in this plane. And what about me? What happens to me now? She gave me an assessing look. Debriefing, medical evaluation, possible relocation with a new identity, depending on the extent of your involvement. I was just a server, I protested. I needed the money. Nobody works at a place like Gustav's for 2 months without becoming something more than just a server, she said, not unkindly. The question is, how much of what they are has become part of what you are? Before I could respond, a low humming sound began emanating from the devices surrounding the restaurant. The shimmering field intensified, becoming a visible dome of energy that enclosed the building. 30 seconds, somebody called out. The remaining agents retreated to a safe distance. The captive Gustav struggled against his restraints, his form shifting rapidly as if trying to find a configuration that could break free. You don't understand what you're doing, he shouted. The restaurant maintains balance. Without it, they'll come through anyway unregulated, unbound by our rules. 20 seconds. I felt a strange pulling sensation in my chest, like part of me was being drawn toward the restaurant. The agent noticed my discomfort. What's wrong? She asked sharply. I don't know, something hurts. She barked an order into her communications device, and a moment later, another agent approached with what looked like a medical scanner. He ran it over me, frowning at the readings. Dimensional tethering, he reported. Level 3 entanglement. The first agent cursed. Oh, he's bound to the place more deeply than we thought. 10 seconds. The pulling sensation intensified, becoming painful. I doubled over, feeling as if my insides were being slowly extracted through my pores. Do something, I pleaded. The medical agent produced a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid, similar but more vibrant than the medicine that Lydia had given me. And this is gonna hurt, he warned, and then jabbed the needle directly into my chest. Fire spread through my veins. I screamed, collapsing to my knees, but the pulling sensation began to fade. 5 seconds. 4, 3. Through tear-blurred eyes, I saw the dome of energy contract, squeezing inward like a fist closing. 2, 1. A deafening silence fell, and then the restaurant, the entire building imploded, folding in on itself until nothing remained but an empty lot where it had once stood. Even the foundation was gone, leaving only bare earth. Gustav gave an inhuman wail of rage and loss before his form collapsed, shrinking down to his more human appearance. The glowing chain still held him, but he no longer fought against them. He looked defeated. As the agents loaded him into a separate vehicle, his black eyes found mine. "You'll never be free of us," he said, his voice now barely a whisper. "Once you've served at Gustav's, part of you always remains on the menu." The debriefing lasted days. I told him everything about the rules, the customers, the feast, Mr. Thorne's interest in me. Medical tests confirmed what I had already suspected. My time at the restaurant had changed me. While the good news is the dimensional tethering is fading, Dr. Amanda Willis explained during one of our sessions. She was the DEC's chief medical officer, specializing in humans who had prolonged contact with extra-dimensional entities. The bad news is some changes appear permanent. What kind of changes? I asked, afraid of the answer. Enhanced perception for one. You'll be able to see things that others can't. Glimpses of entities that exist partially in our dimension. Increased sensitivity to emotional states in others. And, she hesitated, you'll likely experience visitations. Visitations? Entities like Mr. Thorne form connections that transcend dimensional barriers. He's found you very nourishing. He may try to continue that relationship. My blood ran cold. But he can't physically harm me, right? Dr. Willis's expression wasn't reassuring. Physical harm isn't really their style, as you've learned, but emotional and psychological harm, well, that's their specialty. The DEC offered me a choice: enter their protection program, which would mean a new identity, relocation, and a job within their organization. A return to my life with some basic training in how to shield myself from extra-dimensional influences. I chose the latter. After months of servitude at Gustav's, the thought of being bound to another organization, even one that claimed to protect humanity, was unbearable. I wanted my freedom, whatever the cost. They gave me specialized medication to take if the symptoms became too intense. They taught me mental exercises to strengthen my psychological barriers. They even installed certain protective measures in my new apartment. Symbols carved into the door frames, a strange metallic powder sprinkled along the windowsills. It won't keep them out entirely, Agent Carter, my main contact, explained, but it'll make it harder for them to manifest fully. When they finally released me, I tried to rebuild my life. I re-enrolled in college, found a normal job at a normal restaurant, and I did my best to pretend that those months at Gustav's had never happened. But at night, when the world grew quiet and the veil between dimensions thinned, I would sometimes awaken to find a familiar oil-like substance seeping under my door, and in my dreams I still served impossible meals to impossible customers, still felt the probing touch of Mr. Thorne's consciousness against mine. One night, about 6 months after the raid, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with familiar, elegant script. The grand reopening of Gustav's fine dining new location, 0666 Willowwood Lane. Opening night, next full moon. Your presence is requested. Your position awaits. The rules remain the same. G. Below the message was a postscript that made my blood freeze. P.S. Mr. Thorne has expressed how much he misses your particular flavor of fear. He finds your attempt at a normal life deliciously futile. I crumpled the invitation and I threw it in the trash, and then I double-checked all my windows and doors, reapplied the metallic powder where it had worn thin, and swallowed one of the pills that the DEC had given me. That night I dreamed of the restaurant. Not as it had been, but as it would be in its new location. In the dream, I walked through dining rooms more elaborate than before, served customers more terrifying than I remembered. And in a corner booth, Mr. Thorne waited, a goblet of swirling blue liquid raised in a toast to my inevitable return. I awoke with a start, my heart hammering, sheets drenched in sweat. On my nightstand, where I was certain nothing had been before, sat a familiar white shirt, black vest, and black pants, my old uniform pressed and ready. And pinned to the vest was a name tag that hadn't been part of my uniform before. It read simply, Bound. I wish I could tell you that I threw the uniform away. I wish I could say I called Agent Carter immediately. I wished I could claim that I was strong enough to resist the pull of Gustav's fine dining. But the truth is, some rules can't be broken. Some agreements once made can't be undone. And some restaurants never really close. They just change locations. So if you're desperate enough to answer a help wanted sign in a grimy window, if you're offered too much money for too little work, if you're handed a list of strange but simple rules, walk away. Run if you can. Because once you've served the monsters, you're always on the menu. And Mr. Thorne is always hungry.